here. Okay, just let us know when we're live on YouTube. We're good to go. All right, well, welcome everybody to Douglas. I'm really glad that you're here. Appreciate the committee making the trip. Apologize if you had a hard time finding the hotel room, and not to complain too much, but if you think that's bad, try to find an electrician, a plumber, anything like that right here in the oil field in a small town. But glad that you're here. Happy to host you. I know that we got an event planned tonight. I know that maybe some of us got multiple invitations to multiple events. I think that demonstrates the activity and the vibrancy of this community. And you'll be invited back about State Fair time, committee members. And if you want to go see some of that energy activity north of town and see the excellent work that our State Fair is doing, I encourage you to make the trip back here in August. So with that being said, I will go ahead and do a roll call and get started here.
Senator Brennan. Here. Senator Furphy.
Here.
Senator Cole.
Present.
Senator Pappas.
Here.
Representative Berger.
Here.
Representative Nemec.
Excuse
Representative Obermueller.
me.
Representative O'Hearn.
Here.
Representative Pendergrass.
Here.
Representative Smith.
Here.
Representative Stivar.
Present.
Representative Wiley.
Here.
Chairman Boner.
Here.
Co-chairman Brown.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay, so first order of business is adopting our interim rules. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the first thing that we do. Some of this kind of house cleaning stuff, or making sure that we have co-chairman instead of a chairman and vice chairman. Hopefully that's not too substantive. The one item I'll draw your attention to is on page 2, paragraph D, and that deals with the rules that we have regarding what the standard is for sponsoring a bill as a committee. Generally, the choices are, it can be a majority of the members present, or it can be a majority of the members of each chamber, a little higher bar. So I used to have a strong opinion about this. I don't anymore. Either way, we're going to do good work. And so I'll leave it open to the committee for any motions or discussion.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'll just go ahead and move the adoption of the rules as stated. And we can open it up for any discussion.
I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Oh, you say something on her?
No.
Okay. Your mic's on, yeah. Okay. Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay, the rules as denoted in our committee materials are adopted. So first off, we have our update from, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of quick opening remarks, if I could. Welcome, everybody. Just as the good chairman mentioned, you'll notice that I called two members present or excused and not present today. Number one, I want to make sure that we keep our good friend and colleague, Tony Nemec, in our thoughts and prayers. Was injured in a pretty severe motorcycle accident about a week and a half ago, was discharged from the hospital. So we have some good news to report on that. But please keep him in your thoughts and prayers as we're moving through this. And then also Representative Obermueller had a death in the family and is traveling back to Kansas to take care of some family matters today as well. So that being said, I did want to make sure that a couple of you guys have been on other committee meetings, everything else along those lines, but co-chairman and I have talked. One of the biggest things that we want to focus on with this committee is making sure that we stay on agenda, on topic. We want to be respectful not only of your time as the committee, but also the public's time and everybody else that's out there. So if we do have something that sparks up and you want to discuss a little bit further in detail, and it's maybe a little off topic or maybe a lot off topic, might get a little bit of a hazing from the chairman to please reach out and talk with the agency on its own. And then the only other thing that I'd ask is make sure that you hit the mics when you're talking, because on YouTube, if you guys have tried to watch any of these and people are talking without the microphone, everybody in here's good, but nobody out there in the internet world can do that. So, Mr. Chairman, that's all I've got. I appreciate it. We can take over your reign.
Yep. Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr. Fuller.
Yeah, my apologies for interrupting. I didn't know if either of you wanted to announce a standard for the absentee voting.
Right, I'd say do it in writing, and we'll take it on a case by case basis. And, you know, if a bill is amended beyond recognition, we might not count your vote if we can't be confident that your vote is based on knowledge of the bill as it currently stands. But yeah, as it stands now, the standard rules apply. Make sure you get it in writing and either an email or in a formal letter. And we'll just do it that way if that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman.
That works.
Okay, so standard committee rules apply, ladies and gentlemen. No, we have a few new members here, but you know, still go through the chair. Make sure you keep focused on ideas, not people. This is an opportunity to go in depth on some more substantial issues, do some good work, and get things ready for the budget session, which is significantly faster paced than the general session. And we'll have to, you know, get all of our ducks in a row and have them quacking with our bills. So I believe that covers it. We do have a tour this afternoon. We do have a very full agenda with that tour. So I'd ask you if you don't have what you need for a change of clothes or footwear now, go get it at your lunch break and have it ready. There's a bathroom just across there if you need a change. But I imagine, you know, I'm just changing into different boots. That's all I'm doing. So just make sure we're squared away there so we can leave directly here and go right to the airport, which is just north of here. So I think that should cover it in terms of housekeeping. Obviously, for the audience, make sure you turn off your cell phones or put it on silent, and we'll stay focused on having a good meeting. So that being said, General.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Major General Greg Porter, and I serve as the Adjutant General for the state of Wyoming. To my left here is Mr. Chris Smith, who serves as our Commander's Action Group Director. Hey, thank you. It's good to see everybody again after a little bit of a break, and hope everybody's doing. I didn't realize that Representative Nemec had that accident, so we'll keep him in our prayers as we go forward. Let me move to slide 2 on it's the agenda on your hard copy package there. I'll just quickly go through it. I'll do a quick introduction to military department reports and updates. I will try to just hit the high points since you had a chance to take a look at this, but please ask any questions if you have anything, if there's something that I missed that you'd like to talk about. And then we'll move right directly into the intercession topics. We'll go right to Wyoming Cowboy Challenge, then kind of do some exploration and some on the veteran students, and then finish up with concurrent civilian jurisdiction, which I think is scheduled for this afternoon, actually, as we get there. And then really looking forward to providing the committee this tour this afternoon, get a chance to look at Camp Guernsey and what we're doing there in terms of trying to make it the premier joint training facility out here in the West. So we'll get after that as well. Very quickly, if we would move to slide 3, and I'll just go give a quick update to some things going on in the Wyoming National Guard. Deployments are still happening. As a matter of fact, we're going to get an uptick here pretty quickly. We did get on the Air Guard side. Some folks just came back from CENTCOM, but really we're starting to spin up now to get 4 tails and 137 personnel heading to Africa Command here in late November. That's a 180-day deployment. And that's something that we haven't actually done that mission yet before, and just because not everything's set, the mission itself I'll try to kind of keep on the back burner. But getting ready for those guys to deploy and get that to that mission. They did just finish doing their wing inspection though in Reno about 3 weeks ago and did extremely well. You'd be very proud of the 153rd Airlift Wing. They did a great job in their inspection as they get prepared for that. Army Guard deployments, again, we've been a little bit down, but we did have 28 personnel with Task Force Outrider and CENTCOM really spread across Kuwait, a little bit in Syria and Jordan, and some of the outposts across there. They were part of a combat aviation brigade that was deployed there, and we're getting them as we speak. They've come back in onesies and twosies over about a 3-week period, which isn't ideal for us, but all the folks are coming back home now. We should have everybody is back at least at Hood at this point, and we should get everybody home here in the next week or so. the Army will start deploying again in a fairly large groups here next July. 374 members of the 2nd of the 300th Field Artillery Regiment are deploying to CENTCOM. We've done that mission before, Operation Spartan Shield. So they're providing, fires for the CENTCOM area of operation over there. Right after that, the headquarters of the 115th will flow in and accompanied by the 960th Support Battalion and the 148th Signal Company. So 2300 FA will go. They'll work for the 169th FA Brigade out of Colorado. About halfway through that deployment, 115th will backfill the 169th, and our 2300 will fall under the 115th again to finish that out. So we'll have almost a third of our Army force structure deployed in the 24-25 timeframe, which we haven't had that in probably 8 years, that many soldiers deployed. Joint staff, yep, please.
So is that more people than the previous deployment to Spartan Shield then?
Mr. Chairman, it's about the same amount of folks, but we haven't had that many in about 7 years to get that all come at once.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. General, how's recruitment going since we've been now that the kids are high school kids have graduated, and how's that been?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Berger, we're still it's still about the same. It's getting a little bit better. Actually, I got more COVID refusal folks back in the Army than I thought I would. We got probably 2/3 of the folks that initially said no actually came back and continue to serve. Wasn't as successful on the air side. Almost 100% of the folks that said no still said that. We are seeing more recruiting coming up. And so we're at about 95% on the Army now, about 93% on the air. The COVID refusals on the air side haven't hit yet. So that'll probably bring us back down to about 91%. But it seems to be getting a little bit better, certainly than it was during COVID and the COVID mandate. That seems to be sort of losing itself. So we continue to to incrementally get better, I think. Now, I'm really pretty excited about, the 1st of July, we'll be able to get after that incentive and the transfer of benefits. I really expect that to help us a little bit more too. So thank you.
Great, please continue.
Joint staff, really, we've got a big exercise coming up. Vigilant Guard, it's Northern Command sponsors that exercise. It really gets after our domestic response. And it's going to be a bad day in Wyoming across that. We got all kinds of things. We got floods, we got fires, we got cyber attacks, we've got tornadoes. We tried to meet all of our partners' needs and what they wanted to practice and what they wanted to experience. So it's a pretty bad day that day. Rail derailments. We've got everything going on, but its intent is really to stress us and our response plans in the domestic sort of field as we get going. Our Distinguished Visitors Day is on the 14th of June. I believe it's 14th, right? Yep. And so we'll have the governor will come up and be part of that. And it's a big exercise. We've been planning for it for about 48 months now, 24 months, excuse me. And looking forward to getting that thing practiced and out of the road on that one. Continue to do lots of search and rescue missions. Our Blackhawks and Civil Air Patrol do that, and really preparation for flood and fire. Flood season is going okay. I would say there's certainly some localized flooding in that happening, but really the communities and county emergency managers with coordination through WOES have really done a very nice job. And I think we've been somewhat fortunate that it's been cool as it's come off slow. We'll see what happens this weekend. That's probably this weekend, next weekend will probably be our big tests of how that snow is going to come off. There's still quite a bit of water left up in our hills, and so we'll see how they come off. But so far it's been good. We haven't really done any response on our side. Let me move to the next page. I'm on slide 4. Just to give you a quick thumbnail of some of the projects, quite a bit busy with federal funds. The Air Guard's got their security forces building almost complete. The vehicle maintenance aerospace ground equipment, what we call the age building, is about 35% through its design, and we'll get it going here pretty quick. Our next big task at Air Guard is to get the main gate figured out. It doesn't really meet some of our force protection requirements yet. And then we've got the fencing about 95% complete, and we'll get that finished up here at the end of this month. On the Army Guard side, we broke ground on the Sheridan Vehicle Maintenance Shop. It's going to sit right behind the Army Guard Readiness Center there in Sheridan, and we'll finish construction on that in December of 25. There's a geothermal microgrid and power generation project that's going on. We were selected as one of the test places to do that. That'll be in Cheyenne, and it's an attempt to make sure that we have continuous power if something were to happen to the grid as we get going. So we're one of a few locations that are going to get after this. And so I'm really looking forward to see how that shakes out. Camp Guernsey, quite a bit of federal funds going into Camp Guernsey. We'll get the airfield runway restored. The ASP building started last year. We're almost in, we'll finish that up here in this fall. We did we'll break ground here the 1st of June on our first set of unaccompanied barracks, about 90% occupancy. It was actually intended to be a little bit bigger than that, but because of the rise in inflation, we had to scale back some of the components of that to get it to come in under budget. Even though they gave us a little bit extra money, inflation has really been kicking our tail. So we dropped about 30 to 40 beds, a day room, and some other things in order to get it to come under budget. But we'll still be in a usable condition. We were very fortunate. The fire station and control tower, the director of the Army Guard put that on his congressional ask. And with the help of our congressional team, we did get the fire station and control tower added to the National Defense Authorization Act last year. So we'll be able to get that built. And that's something that's been needed in Guernsey for a while. We just don't have the space to store all of our fire equipment. And that tower that we have there is pretty old. So we'll get all that completed here pretty quickly. Vets Commission, let me, if there's no questions on the updates so far to this, let me turn it over to the Vets Commission, and we'll end up after that.
All right. Thank you, General. Mr. Chairman, I'm Tim Shepard, the Executive Director for the Wyoming Veterans Commission. Overall, I will tell you that I'm extremely pleased with how things are going for the Veterans Commission. First and foremost, it's a commission of 12 commissioners. Presently, 5 of those are up for reappointment if they so choose. I know that at least one of them has decided to step away from the Veterans Commission, so we'll get at least one new commissioner, but the goal is that we will have 12 commissioners on the ground being the eyes and ears for the commission of what's going on across the state as it relates to veterans issues. We had a great commission meeting on the 17th of May in Riverton. And we have all of our veteran service officer positions presently filled, which is, I think that's our most critical asset, are those service officers that we have out there. I have a plus next to that because we have a great working relationship with the Tri-County folks in the southwest part of the state who actually cover down for us on Uintah County. And we pay for that time that she spends in Uintah County. But we don't have to have an entire full-time position then in Uintah County, and we're able to take care of the veterans. And everything I've heard from our veteran population out there, from our commissioner, I would ask for your feedback on that as well, if you were to hear anything, but I'm hearing it's going very well. The other thing that I'd bring up there that I don't have on the slide is a marketing campaign that we've had for about 3 years now that we did through an advertising company. And our goal was to reach those tough to reach veterans, the ones who don't normally walk through the door to talk to a veteran service officer. And we know they're out there. We know there are veterans who left us from World War II that never applied for their benefits. We know that there still are a few from Korea that haven't applied for their benefits. The big war for us is Vietnam. And so we've really geared that campaign to try to get them to come to us. And I'm really proud to say that it's worked really well. We get 15 to 20 good leads a week from that marketing campaign. And I really do believe it's allowing us to touch those tough to reach veterans. So pretty proud of that program. Food insecurity program just received $60,000 in funding from the Keeney Foundation. If you're not aware, that's a program where for an individual, we can provide a food card value of $150. For a veteran with families, we provide a card for $250. The Keeney funds are a match. So far, thanks to the Wyoming Hunger Initiative and Dan Starks from the National Museum of Military Vehicles, we have another 20,000 matched from there. So that allows us to have 40,000 to work with right now. So that program's going great. And again, it's helping veterans who really need help, and also our current service members who might be in a tough spot. Oregon Trail Cemetery is undergoing an upgrade. It's been a beautiful spot out there in the middle of that prairie. It will be even prettier when they're done with this upgrade. And so we really look forward to, by the end of July, having that complete. We're also working on our storage capacity in Casper for the Veterans Museum up there. Working a partnership with the Casper Airport Board. It's been a kind of a tough road, but we think we've gotten there, and we'll be able to take our collections from downtown and actually move them out in an old barracks building adjacent to the present museum, which will really improve the museum operations. And it provides a good tenant for the Casper Airport Board. So we think it's a win-win. Skilled nursing facility, still a few punch list items to work through, but they're really close on the construction side of having that completely done. But the staffing does remain an issue. Really having a hard time coming up with the CNAs to support that facility. It's not uncommon across the state that we have a problem with those positions, but I know our folks at Department of Health are working through that. Highly Rural Transportation Program. I see that as a huge victory for us. That program 3 years ago was a $0 program. Today, it's a $335,000 program. And 3 years ago, we provided 0 trips for veterans to and from their VA-approved medical appointments. And we're now up to, and this number is out of date, 416. It's up to more like 450. So, good program. We're going really well. We'd like to grow it. And actually the grant cycle is open. And so we'll put in, right now, South Dakota covers down on some of our counties. And we'd just like to say to our South Dakota friends, thank you very much, but we think Wyoming can take care of Wyoming. And so we're going to try to add those counties to our program. The last thing I'll bring up is the Veterans Talking to Veterans program. That's all about trying to help veterans who, whether it's from Vietnam, could even be Korea, but specifically, this came up because of the way we left Afghanistan. And the question was, hey, are we going to have another Vietnam on our hands when it comes to veterans? And we're not going to have anything for them as far as outreach. And so we put together this Veterans Talking to Veterans program, and part of the second veteran is a trained coach. who has the support of a psychologist who has helped us put the program together. But the idea is this gets veterans to talk. If they have serious issues that need to be elevated to some other agency, working through the company called Mentor Agility will help them find additional help. But for a lot of them, it's just the opportunity to talk. And that's what they need, is an opportunity to talk. And so that's what Veterans to Veterans does. And sir, that's my report.
Okay, any questions for the Veterans Commission? Go ahead, Representative Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again. Tim, right? Thank you very much. Quick question on the transportation, and we talked just briefly about rural areas, and I'm going to say in particular, Uintah County. It might not be getting out there, but if there was an instance where we really couldn't get transportation for someone in my area or in any rural area that we're having a hard time, who would we go about talking to and finding that information, just in case I get that? Because that's something I just learned about today, and I'm like, hey, we could help or whatever we need.
Mr. Chairman, for the representative. Yeah, that would be, you can either talk to Toby Klein, who's our program manager, but I would say to your representative, reach out to me. And we'll figure it out. We'll find a way to get some transportation. As you and I talked briefly, we actually are asking the Veterans Administration to relook that program and to consider Wyoming highly rural.
Okay, Senator Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Mr. Director, we had a chance to speak briefly, but in regards to Southwest Wyoming, Sweetwater County in particular, would there be a willingness on your part to reevaluate the cost sharing mechanism, that the formula that we've worked out in the past? Because I think there's the counties, frankly, from what I know about it, is bearing a larger burden than other localities in the state. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, through you for the senator. It's a great setup for us. I mean, we just know that, we have 3 counties plus covered down in Uintah, and there's no cost to the Veterans Commission. But I get it. It's the right thing to do is to relook it and to figure out what is a good funding model and put that in place, because we do get a lot of support from those county service officers.
Any further questions, committee? Okay, thank you for the update. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, so I suppose that wraps up. We're at 9 o'clock.
Yes, sir. Just
Sorry.
three quick things on the way out. I just wanted to let you know, we did have, we recall last year, Sergeant Holloway from the Wyoming Army National Guard was the best warrior in the nation. Specialist Harrison from the Wyoming National Guard just won the regional competition in Montana, so he will go on to compete at the national level for that title. So good things. And then Sergeant Beck Bridger of the 67th Army Band just won Miss Wyoming on the 13th, so she was crowned as that one. So good stuff. And then if you recall, asked for some money for marketing from joint appropriations, and the governor this last year, joint appropriations wanted us to get a little bit more of a marketing plan from the University of Wyoming. We've completed that. I got an out brief from that 2 weeks ago. Their work is now being graded by the professor, and as soon as that's done, I'll get a copy of it and we'll be able to implement that. Sir, that's all I have, pending your questions.
Okay. Any final questions, committee, before we get into our topics? Okay, thank you, General. We'll open up to public comment this time. Any public comment? Okay, come on down, ma'am. We'll go ahead and limit public comment about 2 minutes since we are behind on the agenda already, but we'll go ahead and introduce yourself. I believe you provide some written testimony we can review as well. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is Marilyn Burden. I'm a former member of the Wyoming Air National Guard, and I retired from Air Force Reserve Space Command in November of 21. I just had some perspective on the recent release of the investigation report of the Guard. I'll skip down to paragraph 4. I'd have to say I'm a little disappointed in the investigation process and results, because I believe it would be better defined as an inspection, a program review, or a staff assistant visit. Investigation, to me, I was expecting that bad actors and bad behavior would have been identified and that there would have been subsequent consequences. It's just a verbiage thing. And then good people have a tendency to leave people who are toxic. I also was concerned that the parameters of this were too narrow, as there's a whole lot of other things going on besides sexual harassment and sexual assault. But as a former sexual assault response coordinator, we used to train organizations that tolerate sexual harassment and gender discrimination have 3 times as many sexual assaults. This report did not touch gender discrimination. So I would recommend to the agency that their EO professionals dig into the gender piece. So looking at the promotion rates and timeliness for women and minorities, their career progression and opportunities, and the number of women who are sitting in command and leadership positions. So if 20% of your force is female, then maybe ballparkish 20% of your commanders should be female. And if you have no commanders that are female, you might have a gender discrimination issue. And then last year I brought forward stories of 2 different women who were getting grief because they were on medical profile due to pregnancy. And one gal was her supervisor got on her case because she spent too long pumping so she could breastfeed her baby. Anything related to pregnancy, delivery, babies, everything like that is gender discrimination. So those are some of the things that that the agency could look at. Other topics I highlighted in yellow, I pulled that out of the Air Force Inspector General instruction. I was Air Force, so I'm sure the Department of Defense and the Army has something similar. Fraud, waste, and abuse, gross mismanagement, violation of law, policies, procedures, and structures, regulations, injustice, abuse of authority, inappropriate conduct or misconduct, and then there lists areas where those could be taken. So the only recommended change that I have, the intent of Senate File 45 in 2022, when I was working with my House rep, was for all congressional and inspector general complaints to be reported, not just those pertaining to sexual harassment and sexual assault. And so my request is that the language in Wyoming statute 19-7-103 be modified to include all complaints. If somebody files a complaint because they're not getting paid, that should be included in the general's annual report, and everything else, abuse of power and all those other things. Yeah, the rest of it is in there. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Hey, any questions for Ms. Burden, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so any questions? Okay, I will say that you haven't, I think the military department has an annual report, which is due in the fall. Is that correct? And so obviously this is not on the agenda. I know it's in the news. Appreciate you being here. Absolutely. And sharing your perspective on something that has just been released. Obviously, the committee, we plan our meetings, about 6 weeks ahead of time. So that's the reason why it's not on the agenda. And recognizing we also have a report due here in a couple of months, but I appreciate your testimony.
All right.
And your perspective. So Representative Stiver, you have a question?
No, just a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Mhm.
Report's due in October.
Mhm.
Looking back at the last report is where this stuff's coming from.
Mhm.
I have the report and I'd like to ask General a couple questions if I could. Or do you want me to take it offline?
Yeah, I think it's important we respect the agenda and not get sidetracked. Like I said, we will take this up in the interim. I promise you that,
Yeah.
Representative, but I think we do need to respect the plans that we have. So I am worried about the time, but
That's why. I asked,
and
Mr.
frankly,
Chairman.
we haven't, I know that you're very involved with this. The committee has not had a chance to review it probably in depth as you have. And so we want everybody to be on equal footing and all that and make sure we have plenty of time to prepare. So there's all those.
That's
factors.
why I asked. Mr.
Okay,
Chairman.
thank you. Thank you, Representative. So, okay. Okay, any further public comment, questions, comments? Okay, cool. All right, so we're back on Wyoming Cowboy Challenge Academy. Chairman Porter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to quickly shift it over to Chris Smith and have him go through the slides and brief, but here you go, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Chris Smith, the Director of the Commander's Action Group for the Wyoming Military Department. The slides in front of you, we have 19 slides, and I apologize for the length, but we're trying to get all the data that we could about the Cowboy Challenge program. The first two slides, beginning on slide 8 and 9 of your packet, your hard copy, really is a rehash of what we talked about at the February interim topic meeting. I wanted to stress on slide 8, the first one, just to remind the committee that the program is 2 22-week classes for at-risk high school students and dropouts. The funding was 75% federal and 25% state match. The Cowboy Challenge program was established in 2006 at Camp Guernsey, and we'll talk about that as we go. Down at the bottom of that first slide, I just wanted to hit on, we closed the program in September of 22 because we could no longer ensure the minor cadets' safety of the 24/7 residential program because of staffing problems. At the time of the decision, we're going to talk a lot as we go through the slides about National Guard Bureau adopted a new process to start up or restart a program. We didn't know that at the time we closed it. It wasn't our focus was cadet safety. We had minor children in our custody essentially. And we now, through this process are aware that National Guard Bureau adopted this new process, including a point-based scorecard that we're going to talk a lot about today. But we didn't know that at the time because we were focused on the cadet safety. Turning on to the next slide, in terms of reopening, again, as we talked about back in February, NGB has this new criteria called the Challenge Site Suitability and Readiness Assessment. I'm going to call it the scorecard. It wasn't in place back in 06. It came into place later in 2010. There are 15 categories and you have to score points in each category. And as we'll go through these slides, you'll see that we would have to have a waiver for Wyoming to meet the scorecard, not having a 0 in any one category. So with that, we'll flip over to slide 10. This is the criteria in very simplified summary form. You'll see a list of 18 items. 1 through 15 are the scorecard. We added going into the interim period, 16, 17, 18, really trying to get at labor force. When we try to reopen the program and look at various locations, what can we do to try to assess whether or not we have a labor pool that's going to be able to support the program, which was our #1 concern at Camp Guernsey. The 15 criteria really don't get at that except for a population. They have a population criteria, which is, I have it here somewhere, which is criteria number 13, where you have to have at least 50,000 people within a 1-hour drive, which they define as 50 miles. So as we talked about in February during the interim topic meeting, that really drives us down to Laramie because you can consider Cheyenne because you can consider Laramie and Fort Collins, and then Douglas and Casper because they can include both. So we're really stuck with those 3 areas of consideration just to meet a population number. And we'll get into that more in depth as we go. Are there any questions before we start going through the various criteria?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Just a question about the criteria change. What was the date that they changed for use your acronym, the NG, second here.
National Guard Bureau.
NGB.
Right.
When did that change? Do you know?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb. The publication came out in 2010 and it really went into effect starting in 2011. We started setting up the program. I was involved at the time in 2004 with the first class in 2006. So it was 4 or 5 years before the criteria came into place. And NGB is National Guard Bureau. That's That's the federal side where all our funding for this program comes from through Congress to National Guard Bureau to the states.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Have you corrected this gap in the knowing when the change happened and addressing it? Yeah, I mean, a lot of years passed between the change and, you and then you not being aware of it. So I guess we can't do much about the past, but what are we going to do about the future?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, that's what we're going to talk about as we go through these various locations. Because we had a program that was running, the criteria had no application. It only applies when you're trying to open a program. Once we shut the program down, NGB considered that we had to reopen it, so we had to meet the criteria. That was something we learned after the fact, which is why we're here. Thank you, sir. Turning to what should be slide 11, and actually has a typo. It says slide 16. Back in February, the preliminary analysis, we talked about Casper Douglas, Cheyenne Laramie, with the alternate being we partner with another state's program and don't have our own within the state. We're going to go through all those COAs or courses of action. And again, military speak, I apologize. So we'll turn to slide 12. And we're going to look at 3 of the key criteria that really impacts our ability to reopen the program. The first one is the first criteria on the scorecard, which is the number of dropouts in the state. National Guard Bureau scorecard, you have to have 4,000 dropouts in the state in order to get a minimum number of points, which is 15. 4,000 to 10,000 dropouts gives you the minimum 15 points. If you have over 26,000, it's 60 points. The criteria requires you to have no zeros. We would have a 0 because according to Department of Education data, in 2022, we had 1,235 dropouts. So we're roughly a quarter to a third of the number of dropouts. Really good for us, right? We don't want a lot of dropouts. We have a really high graduation rate within Wyoming statewide, but it's a problem. So essentially down on slide 12, you would see we would have to get National Guard Bureau to waive that requirement because already the number of first criteria on the scorecard we can't meet. And I'll show you the scorecarding in a later slide.
And so I have a question on that. It's the same one I asked in February. So I'm looking at, well, I guess I'll start off, is the governing regulation, the scorecard itself, or is there an underlying National Guard Bureau regulation that we could look at as well? Or is it literally whatever's on that matrix is the regulation?
Mr. Chairman, no, it's challenge publication 3-1. It's about 70 something pages. It was published 30 September 2010, and I can certainly electronically send it to the committee. It is where the scorecard comes from. And it's also where it states things like you can't have a 0 in any of the categories. It also has appendices with the number of staff you're supposed to have and all that good stuff.
Right.
And
So
I can certainly get it to the committee.
that'd be great because it looks like the scorecard itself contradicts itself within the space of like the same matrix I'm looking at right now. It says, was it on page 1 on that first criteria? It says demand a sufficient number of high school dropouts exists within the state and catchment area, which is defined as 300 miles to sustain the proposed graduation target. Then you drop down number 1, the annual number of high school dropouts is within the state is sufficient to support the proposed target graduation date. So it says 2 different things. Obviously, that's a huge difference because 300 miles from Casper is the Denver area, and clearly you'd have all the lots of dropouts there, and it reflects the reality of the way the program was administered for a very long time, that we had a lot of out-of-state cadets. And so I asked that question in February. I'm wondering if you have an answer for me because the matrix contradicts itself.
Mr. Chairman, yes. And we did realize that because they're telling us it's the number of dropouts in the state, but then they talk about that catchment area. And you're right. I think we submitted to LSO. Hopefully the committee got a spreadsheet that showed the last 10 years of classes, which showed that we pulled a number of out-of-state cadets. We were somewhere between 50% and 66% of each class were Wyoming's kids. The rest were out-of-state students. Colorado, Nebraska, South Dakota, all do not have challenge programs. So we did pull from those 3 states. If you include Colorado, I looked up their dropout numbers and it's the maximum number of points. It's literally, the estimate I saw from 2021 was, I think, 75,000 dropouts in any given year. Just a population thing. So if we could include the Denver area, you're right, we would get beyond that criteria.
And so my question still stands from February. Which one is it? Because
Well, we were told by the NGB program director, it's both. Submit your application. We'll consider whatever you want to say.
okay, well, that's good. So maybe we don't need a waiver, it sounds like, if we say that we're including the catchment area.
Well, we would, Mr. Chairman, we would have to write it that way.
Okay,
They're telling us, again, they told us we had to have a waiver. But then they said, submit your application and we'll consider it. If
Okay.
they approve of the application, I guess that means we got a waiver.
So are you saying the federal government's making this difficult?
Mr. Co-Chairman, I would never, well, yes, I would. Yeah. Yes, they are making it hard. And you'll see that in a few other of these other criteria as we
Okay.
go through.
Well, that's an important one. That's why we're spending a little bit of time on it. And if there's a reference in that actual publication, it's what 3-1, that'd be great if you could send it to us so we can review that as well. I just sent the scorecard to the committee, so we should be good there. It's probably at the bottom of your email somewhere, but now it's at your top of the email committee. So, appreciate that. Please continue unless there's any other questions.
Mr. Chairman, I will tell you that the publication doesn't help explain the difference between the 2 criteria.
Must be an Army publication.
We have, well, as a former Air Force guy, as you are, I would agree with that, but Representative Stiver's going to chew me out now. All right, turning to,
Got a question.
yes, sir.
One should never ask this question, Mr. Chairman, that you said that Colorado does not have the challenge program. Why?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft, I can't answer that. There are essentially, I think the last number I saw was 22 states have programs. So it's the same question for an additional 28 states. It's a great program. I know Tennessee, for example, recently shut theirs down because they had some problems. I think it was Georgia suspended theirs because they had some issues. It's not an easy program, but then again, California has 3 challenge programs and they're seeking a 4th. So it just depends on the state.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does the federal government pay 75% of everybody we send out of state to these other challenge programs? Or did we have any problem finding solutions after we closed it for the 3 that we sent them to?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ahern, and we're going to get to that because some of the numbers I gave you in the slides are wrong because of that very issue. So class 46 was a class that we shut down. We sent, and I have the numbers here somewhere. We sent the cadets that were willing to go to 3 other programs, Montana, Idaho, or California. We sent them there. A number of cadets went home, went back to their high schools. Some took the HiSET, the GED, the graduate equivalent exam. So they were all tracked and taken care of. When we sent the cadets to those various programs, they each charged us differently. And that's what I'm going to get to on the slide because I got it wrong when I produced the slides. California and I want to say Montana, we paid almost $16,000 per cadet. That was because we already had gotten the federal money for those cadets. So that was the federal 75% plus a state 25%. The state 25% is roughly $4,100. So about a quarter of $16,000. So because we had to shift money around, we actually paid extra to California and Montana because that's what the National Guard Bureau Program Director wanted us to do, to shift some of the federal dollars. And that's where I got it wrong because when I was estimating costs per cadet, I included that higher number, which was partly federal, and I shouldn't have. It should have just been the state part. And I'll get to that on the slides. But the state match for a cadet is roughly about $4,100 currently. Of course, it changes with inflation and everything. So I don't know if I fully answered your question, sir.
Any further questions, committee? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Turning on to slide 13. So we get to the second key criteria, which is facilities. There are actually 3 criteria in the scorecard that talk about facilities. The first one is it has to be configured to optimize program effectiveness. This is a very squishy number. Open bay barracks, platoon central billet, dining facility capable of seating 150, internet access, a LAN installed surveillance. So we'll just assume that anywhere we locate this would have that stuff because we would make it happen. So that one's not a huge problem. The second one is the proposed facility is ready for occupancy prior to the start. And we're going to get into that on the slides because there's certain minimum square footages of facilities they want to see. But it also allows you in your application, as long as you can get to it in 36 months, you get some points. So on the one hand, they tell us you have to have a facility ready to go when you apply. And then when you look at the actual points, they say you have 36 months. You just get fewer points on your application. So we'll really get into that on the next slide. All right, so slide 14. On the left, you'll see the facility square footages. And I hesitate to show these up with Senator Pappas on the committee because having built so many schools, he's well aware of some of these numbers. But it basically totals 26,645 square feet, which is a fair amount. So if we were to build a facility from scratch, no prior facility on a vacant piece of land, the estimated cost we got was a little under $12,000, $12 million. I wish $12 million. Yeah. So our concern is our recent barracks project that General Porter mentioned up at Guernsey went from 6 to 9 million in the design phase by the time they actually did the contract. The second building, which is essentially the same size, they're 27,000 square foot buildings. They're now estimating for somewhere between 21 and 25 million by the time we get it built in 25 because of inflation. So meeting these minimum square footage numbers starting from scratch is a pricey business. So that's where we start. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would that then be up to the state or your department?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Berger, it's up to the state. The feds pay for running the program. They don't pay for establishing the program. On the next slide, slide 15, we begin the actual looking at various locations. What we call COA, Course of Action A, is the Casper Douglas area. We actually identified 3 possibilities. The first 2 are in Casper, really in Mills area of Casper. And it's the Mountain View School and the Westwood Elementary. These 2 schools are currently mothballed. They're elementary schools. We haven't gone to a lot of in-depth. We talked to the Natrona County and we talked to the State Building Commission about them. We'd have to really look hard on the floor plan. Obviously, the average school is going to lack barracks. It's going to lack the kind of what we call latrine showers for residents. They're not going to have the laundry facilities for an in-residence program. The dining kitchen space, I didn't really think about, but for 3 meals a day, they don't have food storage. You know, they're used to pre-prepared meals at lunch. And the area for lunch, because they did shifts in most elementary schools, isn't big enough. And then there may be a lack of a PT area. They may have an auditorium, but not a gym. They may have a gym, but not an auditorium, which are both requirements. So if you look at the picture on the bottom left from Google Maps, you'll see Mountain View. The good thing about the Mountain View School, which is in Mills, is that it has that land associated with it. You'll see kind of the fence line. You can kind of tell where it is. It's also the north and the west is more industrial and the south is a little more residential. Because one of the criteria is you're supposed to put these things away from the general population, right? As we talked about back in February, it's a volunteer program. Kids can just walk off. You try to avoid that, but you don't really want to make it too easy on them. The other school that was identified was Westwood, the one on the right. And the problem with it is, it's a little older. It was closed back in 17 versus 21 for the Mills, Mountain View. And it's totally landlocked. That green area to the north is a city park. There is no land associated with it. So flexibility in terms of trying to do something there is low. And again, our estimate from talking with state construction as well as using some estimators online is to take a typical elementary school and make it into a youth challenge program. We're looking $4 to $8 million per school. Really depends on what deferred maintenance is there because we don't know. They were closed. But again, a fairly pricey proposition. And that's based on a 2020 cost estimate. Any further questions on that? And we'll move to the next location. So slide 16, we had talked about the fairgrounds in Douglas certainly has some land and dorms and some other facilities. They're not really set up for a dining facility of 3 meals a day on a 22-week basis. Laundry is a little bit of a problem. Don't have permanent spaces, but they have a lot of things. The biggest problem with the fairgrounds is they book it out. We have 2 22-week programs. That's 44 weeks. So you have 8 weeks a year that we wouldn't be there as a challenge program. When I checked the fairground schedule last time, about 6 months out of the year, they had the entire fairgrounds booked out, at least 1 week a month. So that's the problem with it. It's something we could explore further, but I know the fairgrounds makes money renting it out. So I don't know what you would do with that. So that's the issue with the fairgrounds. Any questions about it?
Yeah.
So that's the Douglas Casper possibilities.
Right, and so just trying to assess the level of detail you've gone into already. So it looks like you've checked the website on the fairgrounds. You looked at the Google Maps on the schools in Casper. Have you done any more analysis than that? Say, in the instance of the Casper schools, what how big's the dining facility? How big's the auditorium? Is there an auditorium? What level of detail have you gotten to so far?
We've talked to the not that level of detail. So the state construction department was talking to the school construction section and trying to get the last assessment of the condition for the 2 schools, as well as a floor plan and square footage estimate. And we, as of today, haven't gotten that number. Part of the problem we have here is, as you know, the state construction process, we have the level 1, 2, 3, which includes refurbishing buildings, and we have no money for that. So we're going to talk about that later because we really need to do a level 1, 2 study to take that minimum facility, match it up against one of these schools and see what the numbers look like. Because we can look at square footage, but obviously their classrooms, not barracks. But so we have a problem. Now, obviously they have admin areas. They probably have some kind of medical office or nurse's station. They have a lot of the facilities you would want. Both of the schools have an auditorium / gym. We just haven't been inside it. We don't know what it is and what its square footage is. So sort of, Mr. Chairman, but not in great depth.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, please proceed.
All right, so turning to slide 17, we look at our next COA, course of action B, which is Laramie. We did have some communication with the University of Wyoming. Obviously, obvious to me anyway, living this, UW really lacks the facilities for 44 weeks of classes on their footprint. They have some dorm space that they plan to tear down for the new dorms that the legislature has funded. And they're pretty landlocked, as you know. Anybody who's been up at UW knows that one of their issues is they don't have a lot of extra land. Now, the Montana program is at the University of Wyoming of Montana in Dillon, but they have a large campus and they if you think about troubled high school youth and college students, you don't really want them close to each other. I'll say it that way. So we didn't see UW, we didn't go very far down there. They couldn't identify any particular buildings they could give us with this kind of square footage. I think if UW had 27,000 square feet of building available, they would already be using it for some of their programs. So we then talked to Albany County School District. They could not identify any vacant schools. We talked to the State Building Commission. And they didn't identify any state buildings. Now, obviously, a school's better than just a building because it would have a dining area and classroom space you can make into barracks and some restrooms and, an auditorium gym. So we didn't, in Laramie, we weren't able to get very far in our analysis. Nobody coughed up, hey, you can use our facility like Casper did. Same thing on the Cheyenne area. We did talk to Laramie County School District number 1. We actually pitched some ideas about some schools we knew that were underutilized, but they came back and basically told us they couldn't identify any schools. And so the assumption is if we could identify something in Albany County or Laramie County, they would have a similar cost to the Mills Elementary School. 4 to 8 million is our guesstimate. A level 1 or 2 study would have to be done to get an actual number. But Laramie Cheyenne's a problem. So we have state land, we have some land available, but we weren't able to identify any buildings, existing buildings.
Representative Stiver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Was any of the old buildings that Wyotech is vacated in Laramie or Albany County, were they looked at? Because they vacated a lot of buildings out there. I know there's some ones going towards Bosler.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stiver, no, we didn't talk to Wyotech.
And that,
Nobody offered that up to us.
right, that's wasn't the direction I give them. That could be a possibility for looking at purchasing a building, and then renovating it. That might be better than building it from scratch. So
My understanding, Mr. Chairman, is City of Laramie picked a lot of them buildings up.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
thank you. Yeah, anything? Senator Pat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And maybe Representative Brown may know this, but certainly in Cheyenne, the old Cary Junior High is very large. They're going to use that for swing space. But it's so large that I would think you can probably put any relocated school in there plus the amount of space required by this program. Obviously, the district probably didn't think that was a good idea, but is that one of the properties you were looking at?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Pappas, yes, we specifically mentioned Cary. Our limited conversation with the school district was they had plans going out for several years to use that as swing space, so they were not willing to offer it up. The second thing is it's right in the middle of town on a busy street, not optimal location wise for a program like this, but certainly plenty big enough for the thing. I was thinking Cary Junior High, having lived in Cheyenne for a long time, but the school district was not very amenable to that.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, the other thing, so like just as chairman of the Select School Facilities Committee, and that's why Senator Pappas was mentioning this, it's not only the swing space that Laramie County District 1 is utilizing for the potential of moving new schools or, moving kids out there while building new schools. There's also a charter school interested in that same space. And it seems that when you have empty real estate in this state, it's a prime luxury. And then I guess I would touch base on Representative Stivar's mention of what happened in Laramie. Certainly worth looking into. Again, as the chairman stated, we'd probably have to look at purchasing that from somebody and then renovating. Those were privately held. And then, of course, the city picking those up. If they're interested in letting it go, there's probably going to be a price tag attached to it. They're not just going to let us walk in, but maybe a lease option as well. So.
Yeah, I can speak to that issue, Mr. Chairman. The city of Laramie has already bought up all the Wyotech buildings. So they purchased it from the original owner who sold it when Wyotech moved to the west side of town. So those are not available. Thank you.
Senator Furphy, just do you know what their plans are for those buildings by chance?
The current use of those buildings?
What's the city using those for, or planning to use them for?
The maintenance facility for our city was located within town. They've now moved all of that to the north part of town. They purchased those buildings and they've renovated them and they're using them fully. So
Another question, have you, and I don't know whether it's even possible, but have you checked with the F.E. Warren Air Force Base and using a DoD facility? I know other non-DoD folks have used it in the past, like Stride Learning Center was out there for many, many years. I don't know if they have extra dorm space or what out there, but have you looked into that at all?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Pappas, we have some familiarity with F.E. Warren since most of the legal staff comes from F.E. Warren. We haven't looked at it very carefully because a lot of the existing buildings they're historic, they're part of the historic district. And the Air Force doesn't use them because of the cost of renovating them up to current standards. So they have excess capacity, but we haven't gone far down that road. You're absolutely right, though. For example, the Alaska program is on Camp Carroll, part of Elmendorf, Fort Richardson. Lots of the challenge programs have been located on former or current military bases. So it certainly is possible with everything going on at F.E. Warren with the new missile system. I think if they had spare space, that was renovatable in a cost-effective manner, they'd be doing it because they're building a bunch of new things apparently, but we haven't explored that in depth.
Go ahead, your report.
Just to follow up, and that was the crux. When I talked to the 20th Air Force Commander and the 90th, they were not excited about having extra folks on their nuclear base where their headquarters was. So, could we press? Certainly we could, but I tell you, they were not really excited about that proximity.
Well, that's unfortunate because I saw they're going to build a new office building. I think of one that I'm familiar with that would work quite well. I don't know what they're going to do with it, but I certainly understand the security concerns there. So, because it's right next to that southwest part of the base. So anyways,
Yes, sir.
Any further questions, committee? Go ahead, Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I find myself dreading asking why. We're limited to a couple of areas because of the population within the circumference. What is the advantage of being near a high population center? It seems to me like if we're going to offer an alternative, we need to know why they want to be there. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft. No, it's a perfectly good question. I think from reading the materials and the limited conversations I've had with folks involved in the challenge program nationally, population is in there as the only one of the criteria that kind of gets at workforce availability. Obviously, the bigger the population, the more workforce that's available. A number of the programs have had trouble filling their employment like Guernsey did for us. I think that's why population is a big deal to them because they set up, and we can talk about this. I was going to talk on the next slide about this. Back in the 2000s, when we were involved in setting up the program for the first time in Wyoming, it was relatively new. National Guard Bureau just wanted states to adopt a program. Very limited criteria, really just were like, can you do one now? Please do it now because we have all this money. We got to spend it, typical federal government, right? We have this great concept of a program. And so there wasn't a lot of consideration about workforce. However, in a couple of slides, I'll show you lots of programs have trouble filling their low-level cadre, what they call, which is the low-level, I hate to say low-level. It's the folks that deal with the students directly one-on-one during the residency program, 24-hour shifts. Doesn't pay a lot. I'll show you the numbers. And it has some other criteria. Lots of programs have trouble filling those spots. So I think that's why there's a population criteria. And we'll get into that in a couple of slides because we added some additional criteria about labor force, employment, job growth, trying to get at, and we've talked to the Business Council, the the Workforce Services, the Census Bureau, the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis has a bunch of data trying to get at where can we have enough labor force to sustain our operations because it didn't work at Camp Guernsey. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Skylar started me thinking on the north part of Laramie, we have the Cathedral Home for Children. It's for problem kids out there. And they have all the facilities right there. And I don't know if they might have some excess facilities that could work. But it makes sense because they're already dealing with problem kids and they've got a lot of expertise on staff to deal with those kids. So it's just a thought that I came up with. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions or comments, committee? Bear in mind that we're already halfway through our allotted time for Cowboy Challenge. And we've only got through part of the side. So go ahead. You good? Okay.
Okay,
All
turning to slide 18, you'll see the scorecard with the 15 criteria and points awarded for Cheyenne, Laramie, Casper, Douglas, and I also put up there we put up there Guernsey. I did want to again hit on Guernsey. At the time, we didn't have the scorecard for Guernsey. I was involved in the process. We located it at Guernsey specifically because of the upfront facility cost was negligible. We had lots of buildings up there that we could allow the Cowboy Challenge to use. So the entirety of the analysis about where to put it was we have buildings there. We didn't look at workforce. We didn't think about, can we staff the positions? We were just trying to set up a program at the least upfront costs and the shortest time frame because we had to do some remodeling over the years. We had to add some facilities as the program grew. But it really was in 2004, 5, 6, when we stood up the program, we did not think about workforce. We didn't look at population. We didn't look at how many jobs are out there. We were just trying to set up a program. And it was by far the cheapest site at the time. So I just want to hit on that. You can see the points. And the one thing I just wanted to say about all these areas, criteria 10 and 11 for Cheyenne and Laramie are red because they're a showstopper, only because we couldn't identify the facility. If you could identify some facility, you get some points. You can kind of see that with Douglas, the minimum space requirements, Douglas gets a point because it meets a number of the criteria, but not all of them. The same with the Casper Elementary Schools, which meet more of the criteria, but again, not all of them. The bottom line, though, is according to the policy, you have to have at least 282 points to be considered a valid application to get in the door. All of these locations, except for the red, meet the points. And the reason for that is they award a lot of points for the program being a priority. The mayor, the governor, the legislature, the federal congressional staff, all supportive. That's 38 points right there. We, of course, have that. And you go down here, high school graduation rate, we actually do too well. We only get 3 points. If you have a lousy graduation rate, you get more points. The matching funds, the budget line items, state statute for the program all exists. So we get full points for all that stuff. So as you can see, any of these locations could work.
On the matching funds, one of the issues that we've had in the past, and I'm just curious, we have it now, but during the budget cuts, we certainly looked at this program very, very heavily, and it was I'll call it on the chopping block multiple times. Do they look at historical projections when they score this, or is this we have the money set aside, we know that we can get it right now?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, they don't look at historical because the application process is really set up brand new, like you've never had a program. So when you look at that particular criteria, it's simply, is there support from the state and a commitment to meet the 25% matching funds? And I will say the 25% matching funds in here, it's criteria 5, 90% of it has to come from cash. You are allowed to get credit for some of the stuff. So if we give them a state bus to use, we get to charge that off on the state 25, but 90% has to be cash. So during the budget cuts, that was our big problem. We were cash poor budget wise, and we're really having trouble meeting that 90% requirement. All right, turning over to slide 19, and I apologize. This is the one where I messed up the math. So we were trying to, again, looking at the various locations and estimated startup costs and operation costs. The numbers for Cheyenne, Laramie, Casper, and Douglas all make an assumption. We said $4 to $12 million startup costs for Cheyenne, Laramie, because we didn't identify a facility. If you had to build new, we're thinking at least $12 million. Casper and Douglas have facilities in those schools, so we got to that 4 to 8 million. Our other possibility, which we'll get into, is using an out-of-state partner. And so not having our own internal program, but making an agreement with another state's program like we did for the class 46 cadets. That is where I made a math mistake. The estimated operating cost for the out-of-state partnership, the far right column, is not 2.8 million, it's 1.6. I used the 16,000 per cadet cost, which included the federal match, which we wouldn't be paying. We've had some preliminary discussions with Nevada's program where we have 20 cadets currently. They were the cadets that were ready to go to the next class. And so we offered them an opportunity to go to Nevada because Nevada was having trouble getting their class size up. So we actually have 20 cadets there right now, about to graduate soon, I think. And their cost is, again, that 41,000 a cadet state match that we provide the state of 4,100, sorry. Having trouble with numbers today. The 4,100 per cadet cost, which is the state match, because under Nevada's law, they can't spend Nevada state money on non-residents. So we have to pay that. And that then drops the minimum cost per cadet down to 16,000. And that's making a bunch of assumptions I'll get to in the next couple of slides about the operating cost.
And so just on that real quick, it's 16,000 both state and federal funds. Is that correct? Or is it just state funds.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it's 16,000 total federal state. So it's about a quarter is the state part, which is 4,100. Yeah.
Right. And compared to, and I think that's analysis we had in a little bit of history there, at least twice in my time in legislature, they tried to, the executive branch wanted to, basically cut down or eliminate the program. And the reason why we put it back in is that compares very favorably to what we spend on K through 12. I mean, it's a quarter of what we spend on K through 12. And so there's an advantage when you look outside just the program itself compared to, overall K through 12 environment. That's always the reason why it was, successfully reinstated in the legislative process. So I think that's important when you look at those costs, it's also important to look at, think about what those costs would be if those students were still in school in our regular K through 12. So anyways, please proceed. Like I said, okay, go ahead, Ms. Berger.
Quick question. Is there a waiting list for Wyoming cadets to get into another out-of-state facility?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Berger, we have people who are interested, but we do not have a waiting list. Once the program shut down, we're bare bones taking care of the current cadets as well as the one-year mentor program we've talked about in the past. So we don't have recruiters out there. Unfortunately, we've spent a lot of time with the school districts and the Department of Education building up the program. So if you look at that, the number of students that were in the classes, that chart that we sent out with LSO, you'll see that the numbers were going up. And, we do other things. We have an educational leader rendezvous up at Camp Guernsey that we're about to hold, I think, the 3rd annual. It's a way to get counselors, teachers, principals to be exposed to the military, and also a Cowboy Challenge when it was up and running. I was informed that the 4,100 is what the Nevada has currently been saying. It may be higher than that. It's just one of the things that we'll be negotiating if we go to another state program, because every state program is different and their cost per cadet could be much higher. So, but it's in that ballpark of the 4 to as much as double that potentially. It depends on what the state's doing. I know California, at least one of the programs uses total contractors to run it, and their cost per cadet is much higher. So turning to slide 20, we look at is again just a rehash of the key criteria population. And again, we already showed this to you in February. Really, we wanted to hit on this to get at labor force, but on the next couple of slides, we're going to talk about workforce, labor force, and trying to get at that. So if you turn to slide 21, you'll see this is our attempt at a various number of data points to try to get a handle on workforce. So you can see here, the most obvious one is the last line of that chart, which is the total size of the labor force within 50 miles. CC Casper Douglas is at 38,000. Just as a comparison, I put Guernsey on there at 4,400, right? So 4,400. So it just shows, and then Albany, because it can include Cheyenne, is 67. And then of course, Cheyenne is much bigger because they can include Fort Collins. So when you look at, but then we also looked at population growth rate, future job growth. Unemployment rate is low, kind of universally across the board. So these were all the factors we were able to locate trying to get a handle on labor force. However, as all of you probably know who have traveled to any of these communities, everywhere's looking for people to work. So what we did was we looked at Casper, Cheyenne, and Laramie, and just did an internet search on Indeed and LinkedIn, and we're looking for what they called entry-level, no experience jobs of any kind. And currently in Casper, they showed, LinkedIn showed 71, this was as of last week, that pay between $11 and $25 an hour, 71 job openings currently advertised. In Cheyenne, it was 101. In Laramie, it was 46. So even though they have a bigger labor force, the concern is there's a lot of what are considered entry-level jobs, which is what our cadre kind of is. So it's a mixed bag. On the one hand, much bigger population. On the other hand, a bigger employment need. So I don't know what you do with that. We talked to the Wyoming Business Council and Workforce Services, not really in their missions to track some of this. But they both identified that, yeah, there's a lot of jobs out there. The problem for cadre for us, and one of the problems we had at Camp Guernsey in particular, two things are required because you're dealing with minor children. One is they have to be 21 years old or older. So entry-level jobs, the 18, 19, 20-year-olds, we can't take. And the second one is they have to pass a background check. They're working with minors. So the background check, as the general has discussed with the committee in time in the last session, talking about our various programs of strength, the same problem with getting people in the military are a problem with hiring cadre because they have to pass a background check. So you can't have any drug offenses. You can't have any entanglements with the law that are more serious than a speeding ticket. It limits the pool. So it is a problem when your population is fairly limited. So that's all I had for slide 21, pending the questions from the committee.
Okay, please, if you could try to wrap up within 5-10 minutes, that'd be great.
I will do it, sir. The next slide 22, this is just all the different positions that the 48 paid positions that we had at the Challenge Academy. Somebody asked during February, I think during a break, what kind of positions were there? You'll see down there, number 9, nursing staff. I think that was one nurse and one med administrator. We had that advertised at various times and had trouble filling it. And then the bottom 3 are the commandant, the cadre supervisors, and the cadre. And those are the people working directly with the students. And that's where we'll go on to the next slide and talk vacancy. So slide 23, I apologize for the incomplete data. A lot of other programs don't really track vacancy rates of their cadre. You can see here, we had 18 cadre positions. In the 3-year period, 20 to 22, we had 38 vacancies, which is a 43% vacancy rate, which is extraordinarily high. Idaho did give us some really good data. They have 27 positions. They only had 16 openings, an 18% vacancy rate. And their average cadre person had been with the program 4 years. We didn't experience that in Guernsey. And then you can see Montana had a lot of vacancies in California, the one academy. But again, we didn't really know how many positions they had. So the net, that's our turnover comparison. The chairman asked us to look at turnover and salary. So if you turn to slide 24, you'll see these are the prices or the advertised salary for cadre currently advertised around the nation. So I didn't call a bunch of challenge programs and ask them how much they pay. I just looked on the internet, who's currently advertising. And so you can see two things. One is there's 11 programs looking for staff. The second thing is we were paying $19.57 to start after 1 July of 22, which is right in the ballpark. It's what other people are paying. So we were actually in the top third, I think, if you average it out. So I don't know that salary was necessarily the problem at Camp Guernsey.
Mr. Smith, I'm looking at Idaho, which I just identified as being pretty successful, and they pay, I mean, it's 0.250. And so, I mean, I think that might be what it takes to successfully retain people is that, I mean, that is a significant difference, actually $2 or $3 an hour adds up. And so, maybe we don't, given the rural nature of the state, maybe somewhat similar to Idaho, not exactly. You might need to not just be in the top third, you might have to be right at the very top. And that's why I asked for that information. It's not enough to say, oh, there's not many people in Guernsey if we don't identify the root cause. And this, I think it's part of it that, we potentially spend a lot of money, a lot of funds moving it, and then we don't identify the root cause, we have the same problem. So I do think, I guess maybe we come from different perspectives. I think an extra couple bucks an hour does make a difference. So.
Well, and Mr. Chairman, obviously, when you're talking that level of funding, every dollar counts, right? Because one of the problems we had in Guernsey is as gas prices went up, it became harder for anybody to justify traveling to Guernsey to go to work from Torrington or Douglas when you're paying $3-4 a gallon of gas and only making $19 an hour. The other caveat about all these numbers, obviously, is it doesn't really look at the surrounding area cost of living or the unemployment rates in the area.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, there's another thing I think I'm not hearing. It's about the nature of the state of Wyoming. We're energy producers. I mean, frankly, not growing hay, we're producing energy, and those are very high paying jobs. And if you folks are trying to compete for that limited pool of people with a $19 an hour job, obviously I think the chairman's correct. We can't compete. I mean, if we don't pay our people enough to get these folks to come in and staff this, we're going to be in the same place as we were before. So I think the reality of Wyoming is we have the luxury of huge minerals resources with great paying jobs. You folks, or we have to live with the reality that I think we have to raise her up. I mean, more than Idaho, I'll tell you that right now. We're not growing potatoes around here. I mean, we're producing a lot of minerals and a lot of money. So I think if we're going to go down this road, we're going to have to bake it in that we're going to pay something that's competitive. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just to comment on Senator Colby, I think you'll hear from the Department of Family Services who run the girls' school in Sheridan, the boys' school in Worland, and they'll talk about their staffing issues. It's a statewide problem for all of these programs that run minor resident programs. But moving on to slide 25. So this goes to the alternate possibility to reopening something in the state. And that is negotiating to send folks to an out-of-state program. We identified some pros and cons down here. Obviously, it cuts the number of state employees from at least 48 to 6 at the most in terms of running the program. There are some cons, though. The number of spots for Wyoming cadets could be limited. Most state programs are going to not agree to take a certain number of cadets if they have in-state cadets because they have to answer to their legislature. We have a transportation problem when we're moving at-risk youth across state lines by bus. If they get off the bus in Nevada, that's not good because we're responsible for them. So that's always a concern. And then the other one is some of these programs like Nevada in particular as you may know, the challenge program that we ran had two tracks. One is a high school equivalency diploma to get them ready for taking that test. We called it the high SED. There's two competing, the GED and the high SED. The second was credit recovery with the idea of getting them caught up to their class and reintroduced to their high school. Nevada's program is only credit recovery. Some of these one of California's programs we sent folks to, I think, was only credit recovery. So we may have to deal with multiple programs if we want to offer that graduate equivalent diploma track, because some of these programs don't have it. It's just one of the things to think about. Turning over to slide 26, again, we could have taken this out. These are the numbers I previously briefed that were inflated. We won't know the cost per cadet until we negotiate a deal with one of these other programs, or at least start that process. We started talking to Nevada because we have kids there right now. But until we actually come up with an agreement, we won't know the final cost, but you get the idea. The final slide 27. So this is the obstacles to overcome. We don't have the minimum dropout numbers unless we can convince the NGB program director looking in the committee he uses to look at applications to include a catchment area kind of thing. In order to determine the cost to establish this at one of the higher population areas at an old school, we would need level 1, 2 study funds. Talking to the State Building Commission, they had numbers all over the place. They finally kind of said $400,000 for a level 1 and 2 study of an existing building. Maybe less. Senator Pappas may have an opinion on that. I don't know. That's what we were told. And then number 3, the workforce talent pool. Don't feel really comfortable in the data about what we can get at. Don't know what cost. And obviously, if we want to pay in the challenge program a higher value for these kind of workers, the potential is we're going to pull from other places. You know, we're going to pull teachers' aides from schools. We might pull from the Cathedral home. It's a problem potentially. And then the final thing is historically at a 100 cadet per class size, we haven't had more than half to 2/3 of the cadets come from Wyoming. So then when you're looking balancing cost versus impact on cadets, obviously the committee has to think about that in terms of the alternates. And sir, that concludes our presentation pending your questions.
Any further questions, committee? Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Comment just to back on staffing, and I'll just be brief. It is very difficult to work with challenging youth, even adults, and to find staffing for that who are willing to work with that type of person. Just to give you a little information, we're looking at in Laramie County School District, Cheyenne. They have 25 special ed openings currently, certified teaching openings. Guess how many applications they have? 0. At this time of year, and it is very hard. They could go potentially into the year 25 special ed teachers less. Is it because of pay? Is it because of working with those people? It's very challenging to work with challenging kids and challenging adults. So somehow we have to find those people and reinvigorate our workforce to get involved with those kids. Yes, it's not easy, but it's very rewarding. And I tell you what, I love doing it. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, go ahead. Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple quick questions. When you guys were operating in Guernsey, what was the employee turnover rate? Were you able to retain?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Smith, the turnover rate for the cadre, the people actually working with the kids, was extraordinarily high. In some ways, we had some extremely dedicated people who loved working with the kids. We had some folks who did okay working with the kids, but it was a job. And then we had a lot of openings. The ideal candidate to work with the kids, as Representative Berger kind of mentioned, you really want somebody who's mature, they can pass background check, but also for the challenge program, some military experience, pretty good because it's a military-like environment. And then also some experience working with kids so they know what they're getting into, troubled youth. And that's a really interesting pool because as Representative Berger said, I think everybody's looking for that person.
Follow up, would you do exit interviews with the employees when they would leave? And what was the general consensus? Was it management? Was it pay? Was it all sorts of different?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Smith, we did, and actually our acting director, Jamie Potter, is here and she would know directly. My understanding from looking at it, like all exit interviews, some of it was pay, some of it was we were too hard on them because we made them come to work. I kid you not. Well, you have to think, we were working 2 24/7 shifts with a changeover half a day on Wednesday. So it was not an easy job. And a lot of people like the idea of having 4 days off between or whatever it was between shifts. That's not for everybody. And you're working overnight for the night shift. It's shift work is difficult. Anybody who's ever done it. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cost analysis for the amount of students in the program. Is it considered at full capacity or is it half capacity? I mean, when you do, for the I'm thinking myself, the staffing cost, how was that calculation done?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Kolb, we did the staffing cost for an in-resident program based on our experience at Guernsey. It doesn't change the number with the number of students you have. You have to have a certain number of cadre per cadet, so many cadets per cadre member. So it does impact that, but to run the shifts, at some point, you pretty much are stuck anywhere between 50 and 100 cadets. It's the same number of employees. If you had a much smaller program, you could get away with less cadre because of that cadre to cadet ratio, which is established by the program. So the cost we had that we put in here is based on 2 100 cadet classes per year. That is the NGB minimum class program size. We never met that in the time of the challenge program. We were constantly battling against it, which is one of the reasons we started taking student cadets from out of state. But that's the NGB program. That's the minimum class size, 2 100 person. Obviously, if we did an out of state program, we have a lot of control over that. You do 25. We base the numbers on 25 cadets per class because we thought that was the most we could probably get into any one out of state program at a time.
Any further questions? Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just general concept, if I may. We have the boys' school in Worland. We have the girls' school in Sheridan. They work with troubled youth. If we add another one to that, are we adding a whole nother staff, which is already hard to find, to deal with the similar issues, or are they very different group of kids that are troubled?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraph, they are slightly different. I'll defer to the family support folks, family services folks, but they're much broader in audience, 14 to 20, I think. We are only dealing with 16 to 18-year-olds, but it's similar. You're still dealing with, you have to have a nurse, you have to have, we have teachers, they have teachers, we have people to deal with the kids, we have counselors, they would have counselors. So it is comparable.
Just as a follow-up, is there any possibility that some of these monies that would go to an academy that we're talking about could be used to augment the existing schools and help support them?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraph, in terms of federal money, no. The federal money is only available through Congress to National Guard Bureau for a challenge program. The state money, that's up to the legislature where you want to put your money.
Okay, and follow up on about the similar populations. This is a voluntary program, right? It's not court ordered. And we'll talk about to DFS. I mean, I believe that is a court ordered program, right?
Mr. Chairman, that's right. This is
Yeah.
totally voluntary. In fact, we can't take court ordered people.
Right.
It can't be part of a probation deal with somebody involved in a criminal thing. It's voluntary.
Okay, so some difference there. I understand they're still at risk youth, but yeah, there are differences as well.
And they
so,
can walk away, sir.
yes. So I've heard. Okay. So any further questions, committee? We do have to keep moving. And just as an overview, I mean, this is we're trying to get enough information to get going in one general direction or another. We'll have another meeting to really flesh out a lot of the details. I appreciate the detailed discussion here, but we do have to keep on moving. So, okay, looks like we'll go on to the agenda. Speaking of DFS, they're up next. I believe we have somebody online. Is that correct? Yeah. Director Schmidt was hoping to be here, but she had a family emergency. So we'll be hearing from, looks like Mr. Weber from the boys' school. So in terms of comparable work that the state of Wyoming does, I think Representative Pendergraph hit it right on the head. This is the closest thing I think we got. Some important differences, but a lot of similarities too. And so once again, I think the important part when it comes to personnel, since that seems to be the focus of why the program was shut down to begin with, is looking, identifying correctly the root cause. And that's why we have the boys' school here. So Mr. Weber, thank you for joining us. Please proceed with your testimony.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I appreciate you having me today. I am speaking in the stead of Director Schmidt, who couldn't be here today. She did want me to pass along that DFS really did appreciate the services that the Challenge Academy provided to some of the youth that had some involvement with DFS. I can speak pretty directly to some of the comments or some of the questions about the differences between the Cowboy Academy and the institutions in the state. The first major differences, we take 12 to 21 years of age at both the girls' school and the boys' school, and they are court ordered. They're adjudicated delinquent in a court of law, so they've been found guilty of what would be considered a crime if they were an adult. So I think that's a major difference. We have had some crossover. Of course, we've had some kids step down from the boys' school into the Challenge Academy, or vice versa, somebody that maybe has been there and then went on to commit a crime and were sent to us. So there are some carryover. I know that we're in a little bit of a hurry. I believe everyone got a staffing summary from the institutions. I won't go through that obviously in the sake of time, but if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the staffing summary or anything else.
Any questions, committee? Well, I have one, Mr. Weber. Looks like we're looking at what the advertised beginning wage was for the Challenge Academy at $19.57 an hour. It looks like it's about 40,000 a year roughly. How would that compare? If you could think of a similar position, somebody who's that entry-level employee in constant contact with kids, would $40,000 in your estimation for what you do be sufficient to hire folks?
We have fairly similar positions. I believe our class codes are just a little different than theirs. Our lowest level, entry level position is somewhere in the low 30,000 range, 33,000. I think that's moving up here in July to around 35,000 a year. The next level up from that is around 38,000 a year. So it's somewhere in the range of $15 to $17 an hour, I believe, for those positions. And then the other position that we have, I think that would kind of compared to the third level, their highest level of those entry level positions, we start them around $19 an hour. I think that's moving up to $21, $22 an hour this year. I don't think that, obviously pay is an issue. Yes, we've lost a lot of people over the last 3 years. when we've interviewed them as they exit, that they said, I found a job that pays me better. But I think also, I believe it was Representative Berger mentioned, it's a difficult job working with troubled youth. And I think that not knowing exactly the kind of young people that go to the Challenge Academy, the boys' school, we get the toughest youth in the state. I mean, we get really violent young men, very angry young men. That's been, as much as anything, a reason that we've lost a lot of people, is that they get burned out. It's hard to come to work every day and get somebody trying to punch you in the mouth, and still try to show them the care and support that our staff do. And they do an amazing job with it. I can't say enough good things about our staff. But Representative Berger's right. It takes a special person, and that has definitely been a challenge for us to keep those really good people, and then to find more that are willing to do it.
Okay, thank you for that. Any further questions, committee? Okay, I do appreciate your input and the information. It does help us. Like I said, we're trying to identify root causes, make sure we got it drilled down correctly. So thank you for your time, sir.
All right, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Okay, next up, we have Department of Corrections. The next closest agency, probably not as good a fit as DFS, but wanting to hear your perspective in terms of the personnel challenges. And I mean, obviously, we all know that's something that everybody deals with, but this sort of work, whereas it's been well established, it takes a special type of person to do the work. We thought of your agency as well, and so like to hear your perspective when it comes to especially what the correct wage is, and maybe some of the challenges you have with retaining staff, and maybe what your successes have been as well. So please proceed, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee members, my name is Dan Shannon with the Wyoming Department of Corrections. We being the department, certainly support any type of initiative that helps troubled youth to keep them out of our adult system. If we're looking at it really as our investments. And I would support in any way this committee would direct that you would need assistance. I'll get behind it. Concerning staffing, I've been fighting this battle for several years. We have 1,023 employees in the Department of Corrections. We have 23 parole offices, 5 facilities, 3 contracted community centers, approximately just a little under 9,000 individuals across our state that are either under supervision or incarcerated. Our starting wage at 2 of our facilities is $17.95 an hour. And at 3 facilities, at 2 other facilities, it's $19.05. We pay an average salary. Now, some officers have over 25-year services, $20.40 an hour. We're approximately anywhere between $3 and $5 an hour, even competitive with county jails in Rollins area, Niobrara County, Fremont County, things of that nature. With 1,023 employees, as of yesterday, we have 128 correctional officer vacancies. I can report that we've taken some pretty strong initiatives that money will get them in the door, and I believe they're grossly underpaid for. We spoke of working with troubled youth, working with the worst of our society. Regardless, they're still our citizens. And with that being said, for the past 2 years, our retention rate is currently 92% with our staff. We're really taking the initiative to money will get them in the door, but management's responsible to keep them there. And with that being said, we really looked at our shift commanders, our parole district managers, things of that nature, really what keeps people want to be with us. And we've learned that after they're with our agency for 3 years, chances are very well that they'll do a full career with us. We do evaluations at 6 months, 12 months, 24. But 3 years has really been the cutoff point for us if we can hold an employee. We look at generational workforce issues, a number of things. So once again, I can tell you that retention is improving for the past 9 months. For the first time, I've been with the department for 16 years. For the past 9 months, we've had positive gains compared to losses. So I credit that to our line staff that are working hard, and our first line supervisors. They're really, people assimilate with
and wanting to be a part of being valued and being part of a team. Mr. Chairman and committee members, I'll stand for questions.
Okay, thank you, Director. Any questions? Representative O'Hare.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you guys keep statistics on how many people that come out of the Boys and Girls School or Cowboy Challenge have ended up in more correctional facilities?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Hearn, we do not. I wouldn't have access to that information. So I couldn't answer to the success of those programs.
Senator Perfect.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me ask about mental health issues. A lot of these kids are coming out of a tough environment and they do have mental health issues. I assume your patrol officers or probation officers are not trained in mental health, but what do you do when you have these problem youth rather than just locking them up? Do you have solutions in that area? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Perfrey, inside our institutions, we have full-time chronic mental health services. We have mental health at all of our facilities. With regards to our field services, our probation and parole agents, they work with community-based mental health folks. We do provide assessments even while they're not only through their pre-sentence investigation. If it determines, we do validated assessments on each individual to see if they need mental health. And so, those individuals are referred to the community providers as adults.
Any further questions for Department of Corrections? Nope. Okay, and I think you did hit on a very important point that we haven't discussed yet with this particular program. This is a voluntary program. And that's important because this is a critical point in these kids' lives where, they have basically two paths they can go down. Are they going to be a productive member of society, or are they going to end up in visiting one of your facilities, Director? And it's hard to put a number on that. It's not as easy as comparing the cost per student to the state, to our school district. There's not an obvious, mathematical comparison there. And as you established, Representative Hearn, there's no data, unfortunately, as to how successful the program is. But I think there's plenty of anecdotes that the program is successful in making sure that you get kids in the right path in that critical age between 16 and 18 years old. So I appreciate you bringing that perspective, and we'll stand by for what we may do to tap into your expertise to help chart the path forward. So
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
thank you, everybody. Looks like we're kind of shifting gears into potential locations. We have Neshonoka County School District number 1. We discussed 2 potential facilities in that area. And so please come on down, sir, and introduce yourself and proceed. We heard a little brief overview of those 2 facilities. Any additional information you think might be relevant, we'd be willing to hear it.
Mr. Chairman, Committee, Michael Jennings, Superintendent, Neshonoka County School District. And as earlier, you did hear an overview of Mountain View Elementary School and then Willard Elementary School, which both have been mothballed. Mountain View Elementary School has been mothballed since 2018. Most recently, it was remothballed in 2021. So those facilities are vacated, but they are, the power's on, lights are on, they're being kept maintained at that level, but they are not ready to be opened as of yet. There would be deferred maintenance. But really truly here just to answer any specific questions the committee may have regarding those facilities or other questions regarding something to do with the Neshonoka County School District and one of our facilities. Happy to answer it.
Representative Hearn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Was it Willard or Westwood?
The 2 schools, Mr. Chairman, committee, I apologize. It was Westwood Elementary School. Willard is one we mothballed and disposed of 2 years ago. And then Mountain View Elementary School, which is in Mills.
And I should probably know this. Are any of these 2 schools being looked at for any sort of charter school or anything like that? Is that in the mix?
Mr. Chairman, committee, Mountain View Elementary School was looked at by the Wyoming Classical Academy. However, they have worked in arrangement with Mills City, the city of Mills, and one of our buildings, Mills Elementary, we disposed of several years ago. They're going to be occupying that building. No other charter schools have looked at our facilities.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from Natrona County, number one? Oh, and so have you seen the list of criteria that the National Guard Bureau has? Have you had a chance to look at that?
Mr. Chairman, committee, we did receive, I believe, it from Colonel Throsh. That went to Executive Director Steve Albogan. He supplied the information as far as that list. I'm briefly aware of it. The existing building does not meet all of the criteria in there. It is a fairly substantial size area. It's 2 acres of land. The building itself is 47,000 square feet. It was built in phases or in wings over several years. It does have a gym / cafeteria. It's a shared space, not 2 separate spaces, and then classrooms. There was a preparatory kitchen or a production kitchen in that facility, but when the new Fort Casper Elementary School was built, the production kitchen was moved over there. So there's space for a kitchen, but it would absolutely need some repair and maintenance to become operational again.
Any further questions? Go ahead, Representative Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Superintendent Jennings. That facility, so at the Mountain View one, I'm thinking about, from what I see, there'd be plenty of room for outside activities as the cadets go out and train, and they could stay within the campus area. Would they also access other areas in the community too? Is that what happens with these cadets as well? So,
Mr. Chairman, committee, I can answer the first part of that question as far as, yeah, there's 2 acres of land. I actually was the principal of Mountain View Elementary School back in 2021. There's a fairly significant play area that goes along with that elementary school as well. As far as what the interaction of the cadets would do, that would be a question I'd not be able to address.
I might be able to get that because I mean, being close to Guernsey, they'd even come up here and say, help out clean up the state fairgrounds. They'd be in the state fair parade. So they will get out and about, not just in Platte County, but even as far as Douglas, maybe even further. And, definitely, take a few field trips if you would. So, yeah. So any further questions? Okay, so if we do move forward and continue to look at this subject for our next meeting, we're selecting it'll be in late August. Would you be able to, we're not asking for a level 1 or 2 study, but at least maybe look and begin to sort of, have a rough estimate of what would be necessary to meet that criteria? Would that be something you could help us out with, Superintendent?
Mr. Chairman, committee, Natrona County School District, the board has set up subcommittees. So one of them is the Board of Infrastructure Planning Committee. It's made up of trustees. We would obviously work with them going forward. If Mountain View was an interested site, we'd be working on them and then how that would go forward. But absolutely, we can look at the facility and identify where it's at from a physical condition score and provide some information on that as well.
It'd be great to have just a tiny little bit more information, get a rough idea of what would it take to get that facility up to snuff and for this particular program. So don't need a specific dollar figure, but just have a little bit better idea. I think that'd be beneficial. Any further questions? Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And look forward to continuing to work with you on the subject.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we have the State Fair. Welcome, Director. Please introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. We appreciate being invited here today. I'm Courtney Conkle. I'm the General Manager at the State Fairgrounds. A little bit about the State Fairgrounds. It's 137 acres with 60 structures. We feature over 400 event days a year, and we're a team of 8 full-time staff members. So we wear a lot of hats, and this is a new hat for us to be with you today. So we appreciate your time. The existing structures on the Wyoming State Fairgrounds include 3 dormitories that are all barrack style. There's Fort Laramie, Fort Bridger, and Fort Bonneville. We also have 2 full kitchens that would be adequate and available for usage. So there's some good potential synergies. Prior to my time in Wyoming, I managed 2 other fairgrounds that both had schools on site. And that was a really interesting synergy to see. Of course, we at the State Fairgrounds, we live for agriculture, youth, education, and Western lifestyle. And so when we see something like the Challenge Academy, we see the correlation with youth and education. We think that there could be potential synergies moving forward. So with that being said, I'm here to answer any questions, of course, make myself accessible to yourselves and of course, everybody that's working together on potentially resurrecting this program. But also, I think that there's some possible opportunities that we have. Of course, there's challenges. Like I mentioned, there's 400 event days. We do have youth-centric events. Of course, there would have to be a full vacation for the state fair. But much like what you've heard today from some of these other great colleagues throughout the state, there are staffing challenges. We post seasonal positions annually. Those are hired at currently $13 an hour, which has increased from $10 an hour. There's challenges with that. We also struggle because we lost forestry support back in 2020. So we lost about 10,000 man hours of support. So moreover than potential revenue, which I think is something that we would need to discuss, if this could be a cost savings to the state, what those opportunities look like. I think that there could also be some backyard field trips that would be huge cost savings to the state fair and create those opportunities and partnerships that maintain strong relationships throughout the state and also help us to maintain 137 acres, 60 structures, and teach those lifelong lessons. So great opportunities. For those of you that have unfortunately had to work with me, I understand, because I always say, what if we could do this, or could we do this? And I know that it is probably insufferable to many, but it gets a lot done. And we look at things in ways that are unorthodox. We look at things we've never done before, and we see if we could. So we're here to be hopefully a resource, if nothing else, for somebody to listen. I'm going to give you all my phone number and my email. My phone number is 307-359-1140. And my email is Courtney, COURTNY.Conkle, CONKLE @wyo.gov. I'm available anytime, any day, except for August 15th through 19th. And really, we want to be a good partner. We want to be a good resource. And we have, I will say this is my first time since taking the position that anybody's been interested in barrack style dorms. So that's kind of exciting. Those usually aren't our top seller. So just looking at the basic logistics, I think that there would be potential to do fence line. Security would be our biggest challenge with our location, with the other events that take place on the facility. We would want to be very aware of that and very transparent about that if we end up being a facility that you guys want to consider or have further conversations with. But of course, there's opportunities, there's existing infrastructure, it's state infrastructure. I have facility condition assessments. And right now, in each of those dormitories, Bonneville is our largest. It was completed in '83. It's in very, very good condition, and it has 512 beds. Laramie has a critical issue that is on our major maintenance list and high on our priorities as far as plumbing. It currently has 116 beds. And Fort Bridger is actually where I think that this might be the best option that exists today. It has 200 beds and it's quadranted off, but there's 2 separate sides. So you could have female and male. It would need a lot of work. I'll be honest about that. It needs some TLC, but you could also have separate parking, separate entry points, make it a secured premises. And those are just some of the things that we've looked at initially since we were invited to come and speak with you. So always available, happy to give tours. Right now, the only other thing that we have on the roster for Bridger would make a really good haunted house come Halloween season, but we would want to do something that's valuable to the state and adds value to not only the state, but also the state fairgrounds if it ends up being the right opportunities. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I was going to ask about the barracks and the sizes. Who are in the barracks throughout the year? And what's the availability of those? And yeah, that was my main question.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, right now, Bonneville is our top used dorm. We rent it about 10 times a year, including the fair. That's why I don't think it would probably be the best fit. Bridger is currently only used for state fair. So in the event that those two 22-week courses were programmed strategically, so that way we could have a couple weeks vacation prior to the fair, we could get it flipped and ready for folks to stay there during the state fair. They would be able to move back in by September 1st. And that's something that would be, I mean, we wouldn't be taking any kind of revenue loss on interim rentals within Bridger. And that's why I think that there could be the possibility of using it.
And follow up to that for the military department is, do we have flexibility in when we set the class dates, or is that something dictated by the Pentagon as well?
No, sir, I think we do have flexibility. We just have to get 22 weeks at a shot.
And for you, General Manager, real quick, you have a strategic plan which includes renovating these facilities. Can you give us an update as to what currently the plan is for that, what the time frame is?
Yes, sir. So in 2020, we released a master plan that had 52 projects. We're currently about 20 projects down. So we've been making great strides. Bridger and Laramie are both on that listing. I mentioned that we'll be working on the plumbing in Laramie. Bridger is in need of pretty major renovation. It was completed in 77. As I mentioned, Bonneville was completed in 83. They look like they're generations apart, frankly. I mean, that 6 years, I don't know if it was funding mechanisms or if it was the Bridger dorms or the boys dorms, and they kind of might have gotten the short end of the stick because they're not super nice. So there's desperate need for that. We also never want to isolate kids from being able to come and participate in the state fair. We don't want it to be a cost prohibitive event. And there are families that still do rely on those dormitories to be used during the state fair for their kids to be housed in. So we do feel like there's value in that. It's just, we want to find the right synergies, and we don't want to invest or ask to invest state funds in something that's not going to get the ROI or the utilization. So we have put that in our midterm plan to do some renovations. And what we would do if it's just for state fair is pretty bare bones. We would get new beds, we would do painting, we would do insulation. We would upgrade the original AC system that is a swamp cooler from 77. So it's had a great useful lifespan. That's our baseline that we would be anticipating for those dorms in the event that they weren't going to be used year round, because right now we don't have the demand for barrack style dorms for interim rentals.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are programs, great programs out there like Job Corps, which I do know Job Corps residents, they do a lot of their own maintenance of their facility, and they do that. My question is, and I don't know if anybody can answer this, do the cadets, not only with their training and their schooling, but when they were in Guernsey, did they help mow the lawn? Did they take care of snow? Did they paint barracks? Did they help with that? I do know that Job Corps does that. Could we invite even Job Corps candidates to come down and stay for a week and train them get some real on the job type training? Even school districts like my program, what a great opportunity would that be for a transition program, a special ed transition program for kids to come down, stay in the barracks and do some painting for a week. And not for pay, for getting actual job experience and learning the job. Is that those opportunities? Are they there? Because I see the potential. My head's running right now. So
Okay, so not sure if I heard a question, but I mean, I think I know whenever I got in trouble when I was in about this age, I usually end up shoveling horse manure. So I mean, that's so yeah, there's some potential there, I think. So yeah, anybody have a
No, sir, I would say that's true. I mean, they certainly paint and that sort of thing. They're not getting into HVAC or electricity or any of that sort of thing, but maintenance, general maintenance all the time.
Representative Ahern. Good. Okay, cool.
Mr. Chairman, just to add to that, we actually partnered with DFS last season, and we were able to get some juveniles that had some community service they needed to do. And so we worked with them, and the fairgrounds is a great opportunity because it's also fun and it's rewarding. and it connects with people's core values. So by the end of some of those juveniles community service, we actually had them on our temporary work crew at last year's fair, and they did a great job. And I think it shows that when you work hard and you dedicate your time to something, you keep yourself out of trouble, it can also be rewarding.
Mr. Chairman, I do remember my question. Do you have, you had said you had 50 different lists on your to-do and you've done 20 of them? Do you have numbers put to all those different figures? Thank you.
I've got, it looks like renovate Fort Bridger and Fort Laramie. This is 2020, 6.4 million basically. And so, yeah, they're cranking through. And we had a level 1 and 2 study just approved for what again?
We're in the process of a level 1, level 2 for the Silver Arena. We have not done a level 1, level 2 for the dormitories. We gathered 3 years under my management of utilization for those dormitories because that 26.5, I can't go to State Building Commission and ask for that if we don't have the utilization. So it's really important to me that we're mindful of that stewardship. So if we were to take something before State Building Commission as a level 1, level 2, it would be pretty bare bones. It would not be, they would not be fancy dorms, and that's okay, but they would be habitable and safe and expand their useful life.
All right, thank you. Any further questions for the State Fair? Okay, thank you very much. Yep. Okay, thanks for being here. Yep, and absolutely. University of Wyoming, Mr. Smith, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Committee. I'm Mike Smith with the University of Wyoming. I appreciate the opportunity to be with the Joint Transportation Committee. And just briefly, I would just say, in the interest of time, that we agree with the assessment from the military department. We just don't have the geographic separation at the university that's required of these facilities. That's our initial assessment, but happy to answer any questions.
And to be clear, we're probably focused on Crane Hill, correct? Which is half, I forgot which one was.
Yes.
Used for ROTC, right? And then the other half is going to be swing space.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Hill Hall currently is office space. What used to be the cafeteria between the two is utilized by ROTC. I think there are some offices in their indoor training or workout facility. I'm not sure which. And then so Crane is the only possibility that's not currently used for office, but it is planned to be swing space as we renovate or do work in other areas. The offices will be moved there. That's our current plan.
Okay, sounds good. And so are the kitchen facilities still intact in Crane?
No, well, it's not an operating kitchen. I don't believe it's intact, but I would have to, I don't want to say definitely not. I have not toured the facility, but none of the equipment is there. And I believe that's part of the space that's used by ROTC, but I'm not 100% sure on that.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the university? Okay, thank you.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Smith, appreciate it. Okay, any public comment? Do we have anybody online? Looks like we did have somebody signed up from Kemmer. Okay, so it looks like we have nobody. Any last chance for public comment here on Cowboy Challenge? Okay, public comment is closed. So committee, for those of you who haven't been through an interim, this is generally the part where we'll vote to authorize a bill draft by LSO. It doesn't have to be anything specific. Our second or third meeting will be the ones where we really go over the bill with the fine tooth comb, make sure it's ready to go. Right now, we just would need a motion for a general concept. And so we have a couple courses of action available to us. And, the obvious one would be basically continue what we're already doing, which is sending kids out of state and, paying that roughly $4,000 per student plus whatever transportation costs to continue to offer the program and continue to build upon. I think a lot of the good work that the military department did with our schools and making sure we had good interaction with them. And seeing it not as, some sort of competition for, the students or the dollars that follow them, but, doing what's best for the kids and offering as an opportunity to, get some kids on the right track that aren't succeeding in a traditional environment. So I think there's a lot of value in that. And then frankly, in the immediate future, that's the only option I think we have, obviously. I mean, because we have to find a facility and get it up to snuff if we're going to eventually reinstitute this program at some point later. So then, of course, we have the different facilities we've identified. Not to say that that's a exhaustive list, but at least we have some work done on identifying potential facilities, which is, has been correctly identified, has been the another major issue in getting this thing restarted. So go ahead, Representative.
Mr. Chairman, thanks. And just a comment I have is getting, I didn't know that we until I read this material that we were sending those challenge kids who wanted to be in a challenge academy out of state. And I would like to see us just continue to advertise that with the school districts, especially the counselors, so that they know, and in parents, so that they know that there's another, option or choice to go do something like that. I think for the kids I know that served in that program really liked that, and even the parents did too. But just continue to advertise that we can send them out of state if we're going to continue to do that.
Right. And that also include funding for what, 6 positions, right, General?
Mr. Chairman, that's what we're running right now into, if you don't mind, sir, into Representative Berger's point. We can go through this biennium. After that, there is no funding for the youth challenge. So even to continue with this, that probably would be one of the courses of action we would look at, or a potential bill that would take into that one. I would submit to you that would need to happen. We won't be able to continue to offer that option.
Right. So there's a couple different elements here. There's the continuation of the current program. There's a continued investigation, probably including level 1 and 2 study at some facility. We don't have to decide today. Obviously, I wouldn't expect that. And then there's the issue of the challenges with the administration, which I guess we haven't really touched on, General, but I believe you expressed to me that this at some point took about half your staff when you're focused on providing a lethal and effective forces to our state and nation. And this is obviously well outside important work, but well outside of your primary mission. And so maybe just a little bit touch on that, what it takes from your staff in Cheyenne to continue this program and the burden that placed on you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The bandwidth for the program is really what we see here. The amount of study. I mean, obviously, I don't have a staff that is focused on this sort of thing other than the challenge itself. So when we look at explaining this to you, I cannot tell you the hundreds of hours that senior staff has spent trying to come together with something that's comprehensible to give you. And that's where really the bandwidth is. The program itself, runs itself. Where our bandwidth issues come in is talking to the legislatures, talking to school districts. Frankly, the administration, any allegation that we get about a cadet or a potential issue there, we have to investigate all of that. And that takes a tremendous amount of bandwidth from that standpoint for that side, because we take this very seriously. I mean, if there's an alleged impropriety, we look at all of it. And in dealing with at-risk youth, frankly, we have quite a few of them. So that's where the bandwidth issue comes from, is really at the senior levels, try and make sure that funding continues to flow, that we have the support of the state, that we're out recruiting, and then the administrative stuff of folks. I tell you, we have some dedicated folks that give to heart and soul this program, and there's a few of them sitting behind to it, but that's not where our problem lies.
Right. And so would it something like an advisory board with other state agencies like DFS or corrections help, or would you need an additional HR position or something of that nature? It would, and this might be something that if we talk about additional position, that'd be something down the road if we actually reconstitute the program at some point, right?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I don't know an advisory board helps us get after what I just described to you, although, it's good to have. It is people to do those kind of things. That's where it ultimately would come down to. If you want to explore, we can certainly get after that, but that's my initial look at it is.
Yeah. Gotcha. Senator Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a question. During all this discussion, I haven't heard any talk, zero, of any facility on the western side of the state. And is there a reason why it doesn't work? Like, somewhere Evanston comes to mind, or Rock Springs, Evanston being close to Salt Lake. But could you elaborate on maybe why there was no consideration done to any facilities on the western side? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Cole, I'll take you back to our initial sort of mission analysis that we did back in February. And that's where we sort of kind of narrowed down based on population, the locations that we could have. And that's where we came up with really Cheyenne, Laramie, Douglas, and Casper. And then we go to you keep it in Guernsey or do you go out of state? So that's where we kind of came to that. Simply, the population doesn't exist on that side of the state to support the criteria that the scorecard gives us.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Chairman. So yeah, Guernsey's an issue, obviously. If we're going to go out of state to try to grab folks, frankly, Evanston or south there's probably enough folks to meet that criteria. Obviously not in the face of it. I mean, you'd have to use some kind of, I don't know, inventive ways of proposing this project. Sweetwater County's got 45,000 folks, 44,000 folks living in the county. And Evanston, of course, is closer. I get it, but we have a Guernsey, proposal here that we would reopen Guernsey and use it, and it only has 4,000 folks living there. So I mean, if that's being considered, I just would have also thought that maybe there was consideration given to some other areas. Thank you.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, Senator Cole. Really, Guernsey fails on the population side. The reason it was included in the criteria is because it had the program there before, and frankly, it scored the best out of all of them, even though we know that that's not going to be a good location for it. I'll just take you back to when we did the population assessment. We couldn't get the numbers to work on the western side of the state.
Right, just to be clear, we weren't necessarily looking too closely at Guernsey. That was added, I think, just as a frame of reference. And so I would mistake the fact that sending materials for it being under serious consideration. We haven't heard any similar discussion, for example, about the specific buildings on Camp Guernsey that that we had with the other locations. So, okay, so go ahead.
So just out of curiosity, one of the things that we stressed for probably 5 or 6 years ago now with this committee and the education committee was getting the accreditation up and running. And we've touched on it briefly about some of the other states not offering that accreditation and doing diplomas. I struggle because I don't want to see all that, disappear. The intent behind this program is to continue with the accreditation and continue, excuse me, with the diploma track. Is it to go back to a credit recovery? Do you guys want to keep the program up and running to the standard that it was? I guess maybe give me a little bit more information on what we were looking for. We worked really hard to get this program up and running. It's been kind of on the brink a couple of different times. And then once we stood it up, the legislature decided we were going to put our money into it. We were going to give this the accreditation. It became a little bit of a tit for tat with the school districts because they started pulling ADM. And so I guess my question to you directly is that the intent is to continue with the diploma track?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, yes, I think that the more options that we have for our students is best if we see that. I tell you, as I look at the assessment, that there are two things. If I go back to the original problem statement of what we're trying to do, which is affect the dropout rate of at-risk youth in Wyoming, that's originally what Youth Challenge was conceived to do. There are two things that I continue to struggle with. One is the amount of students that we get we've traditionally had an issue with that, and number two is attracting the correct amount of staff to administer that program safely. Those are the two things that, in my assessment, don't exist in Wyoming right now, that we can't meet those two conditions. Doesn't mean that we'll never, obviously that will not be true forever. We will be able to do that at some point in time. But I just, in my assessment, looking at this, that I don't know how we get those overturned. I'm very excited about the potential of trying to keep this thing going with sending some cadets out of state so we can at least get after that population. There are some hurdles we got to overcome. We would like to be able to give them the recovery track. We'd like to be able to give them the diploma track. There's some things we still got to continue to work as we continue to peel that onion, there's more obstacles than in that thing than I initially thought. But I would like to continue to look at that.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add, sending the cadets to an out-of-state program, as our director and our staff can tell you, so far the cadets that have gone and come back, and the Nevada cadets currently there, the hope is in the interaction with the individual schools has allowed them to try to get credit. Just as an example, some states do a credit. Wyoming's system is basically butts and seat time. So they don't necessarily translate very well. So that is a big challenge when we send cadets to some other state and come back. That is what accreditation bought us, so to speak, in the Cowboy Challenge time, because it was easier for high schools to feel good about sending their problem students to Challenge because it was an accredited facility.
Well, that might be something, if we get a bill draft going, that might be something we might have to address then. So committee, we're running a little behind schedule. So at this point, I think we can, hopefully, we have enough information to come to a decision. My preference is to get a bill draft going that first of all authorizes a continuation of sending kids out of state. We'll have, we can take a look at what we need to do to make that current difficulty with translating credits out of state to in-state, see if there's something we can do there for this program. And also consider, I think that'd be the bare bones bill we could get going. Additional considerations are authorizing a level 1 and 2 study at particular locations, and we leave the location blank for now. We've heard some good locations. We probably haven't heard all of them. And so we can also authorize that. Additionally, we can look at the organizational structure with an advisory council between military department, Department of Education, DFS, and corrections to help out, maybe not with everything, but to help out with, I think we heard some good input from Department of Corrections and how they deal with, folks, retaining people in challenging shift work and dealing with that, pretty at-risk populations. But arguably, I mean, obviously for in corrections, that's much more at risk than, what the population are dealing with here. So I guess 3 general concepts in my mind, not to say that's all inclusive, certainly want the committee's input, but I think obviously we need a bill draft. Because right now the statute says the, military department shall administer the program. And I'm not sure if we're necessarily meeting that criteria right now in statute. So any thoughts, committee? Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In my day job, I build multi-million-dollar homes. And when you walk through a 10, 15,000 square foot home, you think, man, this would be nice to have. And as much as I appreciate what the Cowboy Academy would do, it's one of those things that'd be nice to have, but we just don't really have the resources within the state. I'm afraid if we try to staff it, we're only short-sheeting the other similar institutions that are out there. So from my mind, I think the best thing for us to do is the kids that want to go do this, let's help them get into other existing places that are already there. Put a picture of the Cowboy Academy on your fridge as a dream, and maybe when Wyoming gets a little bit bigger and a little bit more resourceful, we might have another opportunity.
Okay, so this is the point where we need a specific motion, and we'll discuss that. Go ahead, Senator Gold.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, before I make a motion or suggest one, like you had done, should we break this up into multiple bill drafts? I think because I think what I'm hearing, certainly I'd be in favor of talking about just having a bill draft that identifies how we're going to send these folks out of state instead of it combined all into one. Just what are your thoughts, sir? I'm sorry. Chairman.
Yeah. So it's what the committee wants. It's 6 one way, half dozen the other. There's value in doing either route. So Commissioner Color, Chairman, do you have something?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'll just go ahead and motion get a bill draft started to continue the program at its basic level funding through the next biennium. This, of course, will end up having to go through appropriations and everything else associated with that to continue housing the students out of state for this program. And we'll just make that the first motion. So.
Okay, any discussion, moved by Co-Chairman Brown, seconded by Representative Stivar. Any discussion on that motion for that bill draft? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. That passes. Any additional motions? Representative Stivar. Okay. Okay, all right. So Representative Stivar motion, Senator Brennan seconds. Any discussion on that one? Go ahead, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Representative Stivar, maybe more of a question, or maybe a little bit of a discussion here. My main concern about bringing it back to the state, actually, I have two concerns. Number one, similarly, and we're going to hear this tomorrow on regarding I-80, the NGB having their criteria that we did not have to stand up the first time around. I am concerned about that, the waiver process, all those types of things. But the second thing that I'm most concerned about is what I've talked to the general about with mission readiness and the military's main focus. While I absolutely love this program, and I have spoken at commencement and everything along those lines, with our incredible high school graduation rates that we have in the state, highest in the country, in my opinion, the opportunity cost for us is at that $4,000 mark to worry about that, fund 6 positions. And moving this back into trying to bring it into the state is a much larger cost burden. And just knowing where we were at 6 years ago, I have troubles bringing that. And I'll probably vote no, just because I'm a little concerned with the experience I've had with this program in state.
Go ahead.
I can understand your concern there, Mr. Representative Brown. My personal opinion, it's a good program. I've had a nephew that went through it, did outstanding. Everybody I've talked to that's went through this program that are Wyoming residents, it's done outstanding. I think it's we need to consider keeping Wyoming kids in Wyoming. It's just to keep studying it, to find out, get more information so we can make the right decision that we need to keep the program going.
Yep.
Any further?
Mr. Chairman.
Hold on a second.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Fuller. Sorry, go ahead.
No.
Are you done, Representative? Or?
No, and I hate to throw the department head under the bus, but I don't believe there's a graduation rates as high as it is. I've known kids that are 28 years old that's got a high school diploma that can't read, can't write, but he's got a high school diploma. So that's why I want to do it.
Okay, very good. So we had some input from staff. Go ahead, Mr.
Yeah,
Fuller.
Mr. Chairman, mainly just a question. My understanding of the motion would be this would be a bill draft to, I think, authorize, from what I've heard earlier, maybe with the motion, level 1, level 2 studies for a location to be determined.
Yes, I believe that's correct, Representative. I think that's a specific ask, and we'll leave the location blank for now. Yeah.
Keep studying this to bring it back into Wyoming.
Okay, very good. Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Fuller. Any further discussion? Representative Kolb, and then we'll get to Representative Wiley.
Oh, Representative Kolb here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sorry, I was looking at Representative, looking at you.
It's all right, Mr. Chairman. I've got some deep concerns about the questions that haven't gotten answered. We don't know if we're going to get a waiver. And frankly, before I would be in favor of moving it towards direction, and I'll say it, wasting time on something that we don't really have an answer to. I think for me, I need an answer to just what are they going to accept this? Does it look like a plausible possibility or not? I haven't heard an answer. I don't know, maybe you could give me one now. I don't know. Maybe we just don't know. We don't know. But I think I've heard enough for me that I'm in favor of continuing the out-of-state program while we do more investigative work prior to making a decision about spending money on or wasting or using resources. I didn't say wasting, using resources on something that I don't know we have an end goal here. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and something we could address in the bill draft, have there be a, maybe the level 2, level 1 study be contingent upon approval by the National Guard Bureau of the waiver and getting and it sounds like it's even ambiguous. I want to, once again, I think we established that earlier, just reiterate that it's not clear that we need a waiver. Depending on what the answer is for the catchment area, it seems like they're being kind of cute with the requirements there. And so I just really want to, I've been saying this for months now. And it's kind of frustrating that people keep on saying we need a waiver, and I'm not sure that's true. So it doesn't make sense. I understand the bureaucracy in the military doesn't always take reality into account. Again, I served 6 years, but the reality is we routinely take kids from out of state. So I hope that the requirement matches real life in that instance. So, and just, just a little bit more general discussion. I'd say that we successfully administered this program in Guernsey, Wyoming, population 1,200 people for almost 2 decades. So I understand it's a huge pain. I understand the personnel problems and how it's well outside the military's mission. I understand the frustration, but I'm actually pretty optimistic that based off of previous success, that we can do this if we want to. It's this question is, do we want to? And so I think Senator Culp does bring up a very good point. It probably needs to be a logical progression here. I'm not saying go spend $400,000 on level 1 and 2 study without knowing whether it's viable, but I think this bill is important because we have to continue to investigate the possibility of reopening it. So sorry, Representative Wiley, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also like to caution, getting our cart in front of our horse here. If we do these phase studies, it's gonna cost a lot of money and time. And then with just the atmosphere of backfilling employment and stuff right now, we've heard it over and over and over again throughout different departments, private sector. I think, especially with it falling short the first time around in Guernsey, that if we don't get everything kind of lined up just correctly, we're gonna doom ourselves for failure again. And then it's going to be even heavier lift next time around. I appreciate the fact that we want to do this, within the state of Wyoming and to help these troubled youth. But if we don't prepare correctly and kind of get everything just right, I think we're just setting ourselves up for another shortcoming.
Any further discussion, Co-Chairman?
Just another question for the military department here on this. One of the things that I do remember out of this discussion 5-6 years ago again was the discussion, and it was actually the exact opposite from what Representative Stivar is mentioning, was we were pulling a lot of kids from other states to come fill our seats so we could keep that class up. I'm just curious because it's been so long. If you by chance have those numbers, fantastic. I would be really happy to get just a rough figure of how many students in Wyoming we were keeping versus how many we were grabbing from out of states to make this program work.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown. So we submitted to LSO a chart with the last 10 years of Cowboy Challenge classes, which showed the number of cadets that were on our day, which is the initial phase, Wyoming residents, and then the number of graduates, Wyoming residents and out of state. So with those numbers in 2022, the last 2 classes, we had 66 and 65 residents start. We had in class 45, which is the last graduating class, we started with 84 cadets, 66 were from Wyoming. We graduated 61 cadets, 48 were from Wyoming and 13 were out of state. So if you look at the numbers, that was the highest number of Wyoming residents we graduated, 48. Going back in the 10-year period, it was as low as 13, and the lowest number on the out-of-state students was 3. So you have the numbers as far as we can get there for that. And just to reiterate, the model from NGB of the minimal class size is 2 100 cadet classes a year. That's what they fund towards.
Any further discussion? I think we had some good input. I think we might need an amendment to stagger, have the bill actually be staggered where we seek the waiver first or clarification on waiver, and then if it's successful, then we proceed with a level 1, level 2 study. Would anybody like to make that amendment? Okay. Sure. Representative Paragraph, looks like you raised your hand. Okay. Do I have a second? Second by Senator Culp. Okay. Any discussion on that to have the bill draft be a staggered process where initially the military department requests a waiver or requests some clarification whether the waiver is even necessary. And then if it isn't, or if it is approved, or if it is necessary, then proceed with a level 1-2 study. Okay, clear as mud. That's what the amendment do. Okay, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
No.
Motion carries. Okay, any further discussion on this bill draft authorization? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, say no.
No.
Okay, that motion carries. Mr. Fuller, is that clear as mud? Good, okay, very good. Okay, thank you very much. Any further discussion? Any further discussion, motions, bill drafts? Okay, thanks, committee. I think that's good work. We'll get a good start on that, so. Okay, so let's go ahead and just take, I know we're way behind. Let's take a 5-minute break, and a real 5-minute break, not a legislative one, and be back. Be back. 11:15. What's that? Okay, so it looks like we're close enough to a quorum. We'll have folks filter in here. So next up, we have just some discussion from our UW and our community colleges on what sort of programs are available to our veterans that, you're probably thinking about somebody who's done probably, who knows, anywhere from 4 to 20 years worth of service, then makes the decision to go to college after the service. So lots of exciting stuff going on, but maybe some opportunities for improvement between our university and our community colleges. So Director Shepherd, welcome back. And we also have Mr. Marty Martin, is that correct? Martinez, sorry, from the University of Wyoming. So gentlemen, whoever wants to take it, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, committee. Thank you very so much for the opportunity to come visit with you today and tell you about our program at the University of Wyoming. My name is Marty Martinez. I'm the director of the Marna M. Keeney Foundation Veteran Services Center. I know a really long title at the University of Wyoming. You had already heard a little bit, Executive Director talked about the Marna M. Keeney Foundation out of Sheridan and supporting veterans all across Wyoming. We were able to garner that support into our program at the University of Wyoming. They serve as our lead donor, supporting us in our operation budget, and they also provided the greatest amount of support to us building a new facility, and hence the reason why our center is named after the foundation. To give you just a brief explanation of who I am, I'm a Wyoming native. I was born and raised not too far from here in Hartville, Wyoming, small town of 50 people, just north of Guernsey. I went to college right out of high school at 18 years old. And just like many veterans, before they entered the military service, they went to college and realized, I don't think I'm quite ready for this experience yet. I wanted to do something different. I had to get past my mom and dad. And so the military became that excuse for me. I joined the military still at 18. I thought I would do it for about 4 to 6 years. And that progressed into a 29-year career for me. I served in the Wyoming Army National Guard. 26 of that was on active duty with the AGR program. That experience allowed me to travel the world. And I remind you again, I'm from a town of 50 people. I went all over the place. I saw things, did things, had the experiences that I never thought I would ever do. I never dreamed in high school that I would have the experience I did 29 years through that military career. I really want to talk about that because that really laid the foundation for me understanding what the transition from the military to civilian back into civilian life is like. At the end of that 29-year career, I took off my uniform. And I remember the day I did that when I retired. And after my ceremony, my wife and my children drove me home. And I walked into my bedroom, removed my blouse, and I cried because I didn't know who I was going to be the next day. That uniform had basically said everything to any person who ever saw me in it. It told them who I was, and what I believed in. And for 29 years, I lived that life to the fullest. Taking that uniform off and 10 days later, walking onto the University of Wyoming campus in a suit similar to this that my wife had to dress me in because I didn't know how to match clothing. It was the hardest day of my life. It was difficult to walk into a new environment with no rank, no seniority, no experience, nothing to tag onto my name to say I was different or to really tell people who I really was. And that was the first time I felt alone, surrounded by colleagues and people on a campus. And that was my first day of realizing what the transition experience was like. 8 months later into my time at the university, that was 11 years ago, by the way. 8 months later, a person from the college asked me, so Marty, you're the transition guy. So what's that transition like? And I had to tell them, I don't know, because I'm living it day to day. So tomorrow, I'll tell you what I felt like today. And that really helped me to understand what our military, our veterans, and our military families are going through when they separate from those close-knit teams, networks, support groups that they have garnered through their military experience or the communities they lived in, and then they detach themselves completely, remove that uniform, and walk back onto campus as just another civilian. And that began our program. I know you have our slide deck. If you turn to our second slide, I'm going to give you a very brief history. I know we have a number of slides here, and I'm just going to touch just on a few things. But I wanted to let you understand how the university came about developing their program. In 2009, the UW Vice President of Student Affairs, at that time, Sarah Axelson, commissioned a committee to research what was happening to veterans on the campus. Really, at that time, we only knew that we had about 300 veterans who were on the GI Bill, but we didn't know anything else, whether they were National Guard or how many National Guardsmen we had, how many other veterans weren't on benefits, and especially how many military families or dependents we had also enrolled in school. In spring of 2010, one of the things that came from that committee, actually 3 things came from it. We need to increase the access for veterans and military to come to school. Second part was to build resourcing and academic support for them. And the third piece was to create a facility, a place where veterans could connect, not only to each other and people of like-minded or like experiences, but also to the resources that could support them. In 2010, that place opened as the Veteran Services Center, and it began in Knight Hall. It was a very small, I would say a large closet, is what it felt like. And we were trying to support those students, those 320 some students that they had identified out of a place that when I got there 2 years later, we found out we could fit 12 people into the whole facility. 2012, I began. The important part of that is that I began as an actual line item for the college budget. So I am an employee for the University of Wyoming. I'm not VA or VA related or anything of that nature. I am a University of Wyoming employee, and our Veteran Center is a UW product. In 2016, I began. So really what happened in 2012, they took me upstairs, they gave me the keys, said, open this at 8, close it at 5. We had no program. There was nothing for me to really do except to start to visit with students. I'm going to tell you that I already told you that I went to college for a semester, realized I had no beer money, I was broke, and that's really what led me to join the military. But outside that, I never really went back to college. My education came as a very professional education through the military. I rose to senior ranks in the enlisted corps, and then on the NCO corps, and then I went into warrant officer. And so my experience, my education came through that. I took some college courses as part of opportunities within the military, but I never really refocused back into an academic education. So really our program began by talking to students in 2012. I had to know what was going on, and I had to know what we needed. And the students were the ones that told us that. So in a lot of other organizations or facilities like mine on other campuses, they tell you, well, I went to school 30 years ago, and this is what it felt like for me. So that's what I addressed. We are literally addressing every single year the new batch of students when they come in and say, this is the newest thing we're experiencing. We're changing our program to try to address that. Very quickly, by 2016, we were recognized in the top 2% of colleges and universities by Military Advanced Education and Transition magazine. I don't really put that out there to brag on us. By 2016, campuses all across the country were realizing veterans were coming to them in droves. And they were realizing that veterans had baggage. They had challenges that were very specific to our culture, to who we are as military men and women. And they were having to face those challenges as campuses, and how do we assist these students to find more success? About 870 schools were surveyed that year, and we came out in the top 2% for what we were doing for our veterans at the University of Wyoming. Since then, we've dropped down to about the top 10 to 15% is where we normally land. And that's not because we're doing anything less, it's because the country finally started to do more, and there's more and more opportunities for student veterans. In the fall of 2018, our program then looked out and said, how can we build one more time? How do we increase where we're at and what we're doing? And we created our new facility located on the 3rd floor of the student union. If you go to the next page. Very briefly, this is our mission statement. To put it very brief, we transition our warriors to scholars. We're there to help our military men and women, whether they're service members or veterans or military family members in that transition from military to civilian life. And I really want to emphasize the military family aspect of that. We are one of a few programs in the country that take our services and address it to our military family members. And that was an important thing for me. I know growing up, when I had to leave home for any training or anything else that I was doing, it was the people that stayed back that took care of my family. And that's one of the promises we make to parents, to military members, as they drop off their children at the University of Wyoming. We say, hey, they just picked up 662 brothers and sisters, whether they want them or not. They're part of that family now. And that's just something that we do. Next page, please. And on the VSC areas of focus, as I talked about, access, retention, and student support, and then also the successful integration to employment and community. And that's really our resource connection. When we talked about access and the skill transition, we really wanted to focus everything we do to our veterans in the first 3 semesters. And that's a critical point, not just for us, but all across the country. That's a standard. Everybody wants to get a veteran settled, acclimated, and really moving forward within those first 3 semesters. Anything outside that, we see a great reduction in those veterans making it to college graduation. One of the things that we've been able to do in this, so the general kind of really set this for us when you talked about those increased deployments that are coming up in the future, those are college students too. And some of those college students will be going to school when they get that activation order and that alert notice, and it's going to interrupt their school time. And so we are actually there as an advocate for those students. And since I've been there, we've been able to guide the university in developing policy to help with that all school withdrawal. So those students can continue to serve our country and our state through those military activations. At the same time, if possible, continuing their education while they're deployed, or at least removing them from school the right way, so it doesn't hurt them. And it also returns the funds back to the institutions that are paying them, whether it be VA, federal, or state funds. The retention and support part that we've done is we've created 6 academic programs to support our veterans. A very first one that comes to mind is a summer bridge program where veterans, kind of as the chairman had mentioned, they may be out for 4 to 6 years from academia as they're starting to serve their military career. And it may take 4 to 6 years, or as many as 29 years before they walk back onto our college campus. For some of them, that time away needs to be restarted. We need to bring them in, and that summer bridge program is an opportunity to bring them in and kind of give them an entry back into college life, back into learning how to study, how to kind of reshape those skills they learned in the military and prep them for an academic setting. And so we do have that program. It's a 4-week program that we run in the summer. And we have an additional suite of 5 other academic courses that we provide to them, everything from onboarding, sustainment while they're 2nd to 4th year, and then helping to do an employment search and opportunities for them on their time, about the time that they're going to graduate. Next slide, please. We'll go to our budget model. Something I really wanted to tell you about our budget model is when we talk about the University of Wyoming and maybe some of the other colleges, campuses within Wyoming, it's wonderful that we want to do so much for our veterans, but it's really driven by what we're able to do. Number one, by the people servicing them, but also by funding, by how much money we have to support them. At the University of Wyoming, when I came on, my boss and I sat down and we talked about how we wanted to fund this program. We had an offer from the university that they would fund the program or they would fund a full-time position. And we said, fund the full-time position. That wasn't selfish on my part saying, yeah, fund my job so I have a paycheck. But it's really hard to recruit when the person you're recruiting has to rely on the hope of a continuing grant funding or something like that, or the same amount of money coming in so it doesn't affect their paycheck. So we wanted to make sure that the director's position would always be funded in that manner. At that point, we said, but we are going to fund the program 100% by private donation. And that was a very, very reasoned choice so that we did not have to, growing up in the military, I learned how we did our budget system. And it's like any other governmental agency. You're going to save, and then at the end, dump, so that you get your money back and do it all over again. And we did not want to have to go through that cycle. And so because we are private funded, I'm able to actually act more like a business. And I can pull money in, I can save it for programs in the future. I can earmark money to support different levels of programming. And then we can also, it does create some challenges. We have to go out and continually ask for support, but it also gives us a great opportunity around the state of Wyoming to really make great contacts with individuals who do want to support our program. And so we've been able to really create some great relationships that have not just led to funding for our program, but has also led to scholarships for our students. Mr. Hepworth, who is seated in the audience, is a new employee for us. So for 11 years, I've been the only employee trying to do this job. And a donor came and said, what else can we do? And I said, I need another person. I'm at a point now where if I want to do something more, I literally have to take something off the table because there's just not enough of me to go around. I cannot continue to keep pushing forward. And that donor actually stepped up and provided funding for an additional position, fully benefited position for the next 3 years. That person will pay for that position, and the university has agreed to accept that position and fully fund it thereafter. Let's see, we'll go to the student demographics. Will be on the next slide. And it's just a quick snapshot of what we saw this past semester. 660 military connected students, 440 male, 220 of those female. So about 1/3 of our population is female. 488 of those veterans or military members are on benefits, and those benefits could be anything from VA education benefits to National Guard benefits, or even state of Wyoming benefits as well. The key number to that is 172 veterans not on any financial benefit because of their service. And so they've either expended their benefits, they're saving those benefits, or they don't have access to them. They may not be qualified for continuing benefits. And so those 172, we still want to serve. And I'm going to give you a great example of that and how we were able to work with the university. We have priority registration. Priority registration, when it was my 3rd day on the job, they took me in a meeting and we were talking about priority registration. I didn't even know what that was. And so they explained it to me on the way to the meeting. I said, oh, that's great. So we'll be the first ones to actually register for classes. And they said, yeah. And I said, okay, that sounds great. Well, awesome. And I actually went in, I made an argument. I was told later I can't talk to vice presidents like that, but I made an argument and kind of pushed a little with it, but we understood exactly what we were asking and the importance of it. And it was very important for our veterans to be able to register to get the classes they need within the timeline of their benefits. And so it gave them the greatest opportunity to get every class at the right time. However, when we wrote that policy, it was based upon them being on a GI Bill benefit. And so it really states, in recognition of your service, well, it had nothing to do with that. It was in recognition of the benefit you're bringing to this school. And when the benefit runs out, we took the priority registration away from that student. We went back about 2 years ago and talked with the school, talked about the optic of that. And the school said, we agree, and we're changing that. And so today, it is not based upon your benefit, it is based upon your military service. And so now service members and veterans and military family members, all they have to do is my office validates that service, and then they are added to that list. And for as long as they are a UW student for a lifetime, they will receive priority registration. That is based upon service and not upon the benefit they earned. And so we're very thankful to the school for that. Next slide, we'll talk about the success and results. The Veteran Services Center, I would say, is our biggest success. It was an opportunity to create a much larger facility that now we can serve many, many more of our students. And I think in that first line, you'll see that we have, when we started out, we were at 6,800 hits in our old facility. A hit is something that we call when a student walked through our door to use our services. 6,800 times a student was walking through our doors in those first few years. And now we thought that was pretty good. We hit that number in the first semester when we opened our new facility. And so we are averaging now 13,000 hits per year out of our new facility. And so it's a wonderful space for us. Our staffing, we now have 2 full-time staff. We have 8 VA work study student veterans. And so these are actually students going to school on the GI Bill, and the VA actually pays them a wage to work for us. And so it is an opportunity for us to gain support for our program, but at the same time offering an extended financial benefit to our students. We also employ 3 student tutors and 1 adjunct professor who handles our 6 academic courses. My staff provides over 60 activities and events per academic year, and that's pretty outstanding for them. One of the other things we just took on was providing meals for our students to kind of talk about food insecurity amongst them. And this year we provided, it was about 1,600 meals to student veterans in our facility. You can see the other success and results. I don't want to take up too much time from our other guests. I think the important thing that we really did, something that we talked about in our orientation, is redefining success. And in the military, we learned success was mission accomplishment, and everything drove to mission accomplishment. All of your goals, your push, everything was to get that mission done to the best of your ability and to the highest standard possible. We really work with our veterans to get them to understand that we're not in that culture anymore, that it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to change and take a different direction. So many veterans are told, well, hey, so you did this in the military, you'd make a great cop and you're almost halfway there. So you should go be a police officer. And when you talk to these vets about their third year, they're like, I don't know why I'm doing this. I hate this. And we say, then why were you doing it? Because somebody told me that's what I should be. And we said, no, let's stop and let's back up. And so we really try to work with our veterans to redefine that level of success. And it's not mission success that we're after now, it's personal success. It's quality of life. And that really is our focus at the University of Wyoming, is how do we help these veterans find a more successful place in life, whether that be in education and academia, or that going to work and finding a job at the current and right time, or is it studying to get that great career and find that community you want to live within somewhere in America. And that's really what we're trying to do at the University of Wyoming. That's what our program is about. And that's why I feel so strongly that programs like this should exist on every college campus. There is just too much stress involved in education. And for veterans, military members coming out of the military, none of that is known to us. I learned in 29 years how to be a really good soldier. They gave me 3 days to figure out how to be a civilian. And it just didn't work. It's a day-to-day discovery. And it's made so much simpler if there are people right there next to you, peers, mentors, professionals who can tell you how that change is going to happen, how it's going to affect you, and how you can work with it to make it part of your life. I came out with 90% rated disability. Doesn't mean I'm disabled, but it does mean I have conditions and I have things that I have to learn how to live with now. That's just part of my life. And our young men and women who are in their mid-20s or maybe early 30s have that same level or more of disability. And they're trying to figure out, how do I continue to be that person I used to be? And that person may be different. But programs like ours and many others can really help our veterans to make those changes, to find that new way of life, and to find that better quality of life. And I'll go ahead and end with that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Martinez, for your presence here and for all that you're doing at the University of Wyoming campus. I'll have some comments later, but committee, any questions or comments right now? Mr. Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here, sir, and appreciate your service and everything. And there's no book on transition. I worked with the disabled group that transition I was to 20 years ago, asked by my boss, we don't have a transition program, figure it out. And you're like, same steps. It takes a lot. And I commend that. And it's amazing. Transition just doesn't happen in the world of the disabled and special ed, but in our veterans to our whoever, there's lots of transitions in our lives, and it takes a special person to do that. And I appreciate your work. Amazing.
Thank you.
I would love to see your facility. I'd love to come and see what you guys are doing. So, and we'll sing the beer song.
Okay, any further questions or comments at this point? Okay, once again, I appreciate what you're doing, Mr. Martinez, and that's, we had the, I think we all of us sort of had that similar experience, and, you take that week-long class and they try to tell you, at least when I did, I don't know if it's different for anybody else here, it's like, well, this is what your specialty was in the military, and some of it translates to folks like me, there's obviously no civilian equivalent, and it's like, well, have fun, and so I see it's something I'm passionate about personally, that's why we're having, this topic. There's only so much we can do in the private sector, but this is an opportunity where obviously there's the state runs the university, we run our community colleges. I think there's an opportunity for those veterans that get out and go back to do some sort of academic instruction to make sure that we're helping them with that transition. And I think we've done a real good job, getting them hooked up with benefits, getting them, their education paid for. But what Mr. Martinez pointed out is very articulately is a huge deal as well. And I think if you look at that last slide there, since you institute your program, you doubled the number of veteran students at the university. I just, maybe you can hit on that a little bit more. Is that something that you did, or that just happened, or did you go out and recruit a bunch of folks who are separating the University of Wyoming? How does that work?
Mr. Chairman, thank you for that question. Really, we didn't recruit, and people have asked us often, Marty, where can we recruit? Where can we go? Well, there is no one place where you can talk to all veterans. And that was one of the reasons why we started to fill out the different surveys coming from Military Times, from the Transition Magazine, different places that are being sent to military institutions or military facilities across the country and the world, really. And veterans will pick those up, or military members will pick them up and read them in preparation for when they do leave. A lot else that has happened that we hear a lot of is students coming to us and saying, my friend came to UW and instantly called me and told me this is the place I need to come to. And so we get a lot of by mouth advertising, which among the veteran community is one of our best advertisements. We try to tell our people, if you really mess this up, the veterans are going to tell each other about it. But if you make it a really good program, that will get shared as well. So I think that is probably where most of our advertising and recruiting comes from, is by personal experience, sharing it with other veterans.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I mean, you increase enrollment in the university, seems like by 300 students, and it seems like the vast majority of them, their tuition is paid for by the federal government. So I think that's something we should all consider. Okay, any further questions, committee? Oh, go ahead. Representative Perry.
Thank you, Chief, for your service. I just wanted you to know how much I appreciate your comments on the funding and going out and finding some funding. Sometimes our knee-jerk reaction is just turn around and dip into the purse. And I really appreciate the fact that it gives you some liberty to spend more efficiently. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft, thank you so much for that. I think, I guess my attitude when I came into this was, we're not here to ask for a handout. We'll support ourselves, but you have to give us the opportunity to do that. The school has been wonderful in connecting us with the University Foundation, and they are a major support to us. I presented to their entire gift officer staff, and they said it was one of the first times that just about every one of the gift officers came forward and said, we want to support you. And so we have had some wonderful connections. Just to give you an idea, we had an individual, he is a UW alum, but he is not military affiliated. And we were able to sit down, explain what we do, how we do it, why we do it, who we do it for. He met some of our students, he and his wife. My actual title is named after his family as a directorship. That was part of bringing Mr. Hepworth on, was they said, we get to name Marty's position, which was like, yes, sir. But he also established for us a $1.5 million scholarship for our veterans. And so it's just awesome to have been associated to that and see the amount of, especially in Wyoming, to see the amount of people that want to step forward, support our veterans, make sure that they're taken care of as best we can, or at least as we can at the University of Wyoming.
Any further questions or comments right now? Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Martinez. Appreciate the successful program you've administered, and we'll see what we can do to replicate it. So, okay. Next up, we have the Community College Commission. Unless Mr. Smith with EW, you good? Okay, cool. All right, come on down, sir. Yep. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Ben Moritz. I'm Deputy Director of the Community College Commission. And if I could, just to begin, to echo the accolades and the thanks for the great work that's being done at UW to support the veteran students there. A lot of great work is also being done at the colleges. I feel a little bit not quite qualified. I am, as an administrator for the Community College Commission, giving some secondhand accounts of what's going on at the colleges. And I'm not right down there, working with the students, not one-to-one. And so again, the great work that's being done there, I would like to add my thanks as well. So we had presented a document to the Legislative Services Office. Hopefully you have that. It's kind of an overview of what's going on at the colleges. I'm just bringing mine up too so I can follow along. The colleges are each, as you know, individually overseen by their locally elected boards of trustees. And the colleges and the commission on behalf of the colleges takes a lot of pride in the individual nature of those colleges. Each college is very much able, through this structure, to listen to their community and to decide how best to serve the needs of their community. Sometimes that provides difficulties when then someone in my role is presenting to people in your role as far as what do the colleges do? Well, there are 8 colleges and each of them do slightly different things. But the commitment to serving the needs of their veteran students is equally high across all of those colleges. If you look through that document, one of the things I wanted to call out was that Casper College in particular has been recognized a couple of times by different organizations as being one of the best, well, 2 recognitions. One for being one of the best small community colleges in the country as far as serving veteran students. And then most recently, one of the best overall in the country for serving veteran students. And the way that the colleges support these students can be broken down into different areas. First of all, obviously there's financial aid, whether it's from the federal government, whether it's from the state of Wyoming through the veteran benefits. And then there are also individual scholarships that derive from donors and endowments from the at the colleges individually. And if anybody is wondering, well, that seems redundant or there's a lot of different funding sources to serve these same students, there are a lot of different types of costs that go along with being a college student. And so while VA benefits or GI benefits might help with tuition, there are fees, there's housing, there are books, there are things like childcare. A lot of the veteran students are adults who have to balance work and life. And so the colleges all go out of their way to work with their donors and different groups to make sure that all of those costs are covered or as much as possible. Another piece is just providing the financial aid certification and oversight that students need in order to maximize the aid that they can get from the federal government. It's the worst thing that you can do for a veteran student is say, come to our school, you have these benefits, we want to help you take advantage of them. And then they show up and they say, okay, how do I do this? And, a college says, I don't know, that's your problem. That doesn't happen here in Wyoming. I'm very proud to say. Occasionally you do hear stories about that at other institutions, but the colleges and the university really have made that a priority, and all of the financial aid offices see that as one of their primary purposes. Another piece is providing advising and peer-to-peer tutoring and mentoring. The colleges each, again, have a different approach to this, but they have entered into or ended up with very similar models. And one of the things that they've discovered is that, first of all, ensuring that the benefits last as long as possible requires very careful advising. And again, this is to echo what was said before, to make sure that the benefits don't run out and the students can maximize that. But another piece is they found that peer-to-peer mentoring is very important. And by peer-to-peer, I mean other veteran students who have been there and seen these things. Part of that is a transition piece, and I don't want to talk through that. I think that was, again, presented very well. But another piece is just, you're coming from this military background. I'm from that military background. Here at, say, Central Wyoming College, for example, there's a separate culture. And I've had the chance to learn about that culture a little bit. Let me tell you how these things connect. Now, let me tell you who to talk to. Let me tell you where to go. Let me tell you a great place, to grab a beer after class, or let me tell you a great teacher who really is understanding of the unique challenges that perhaps the veteran students face. So those peer-to-peer setups are at all of the colleges. And then a final point that I would like to highlight is the importance of having a space. And again, to some extent, I'm echoing what the University of Wyoming is doing in spades. The colleges are all much smaller, and some of them quite a bit smaller. And so what those spaces look like vary. Typically what it will be is the college will identify a space and assign it to a particular student club. The veterans students are very good at organizing and creating clubs. I believe all of the colleges have these clubs, and they're very well supported. The colleges can provide separate space for that like they would any club. Beyond that, donations and fundraising projects have been done at several of the colleges to either enhance those spaces, make them more permanent, or actually go out and obtain those spaces for themselves, either through acquiring those spaces or renting them or different setups. Again, each of the colleges is slightly different. So if you do look at the document that I provided, there's a couple of pictures, or I think there's just one picture. I had to choose the best. I didn't want to, send you a 16-page document filled with too many pictures. But this is of the LCCC Veterans Lounge that they have there. And they've just received a real outpouring of donations, materials, equipment from the community as a whole and the institution itself. And so those veterans lounges, veterans centers, they each have different names. Across the board, when I reached out to our VPs of student services at each of the colleges, they said they're well supported, they are always being used, and they receive a lot of great feedback, both from the community as a whole and in particular, of course, the veteran students. So I'll pause there, and if anybody has any questions or comments, I'd be happy to respond and to the best of my ability.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Any questions? Go ahead.
Ben, thanks for being here. Tell Sandy she's not off the hook now for, if I have to do 4 days and Representative Berger has to do 4 days, she has to come do a couple extra. So I am curious if there's, as you mentioned, you're kind of getting that second hand.
Mhm.
Has there been any discussion within the commission of putting together a level of a position similar to what UW has at the commission level to try to, collaborate all of the 8 now community colleges and get that same level of support across everywhere? Because I know Laramie County does great. We have a huge population down there, veterans. I know we have veterans across the state as well, but they're not going to probably be as large in population in some of these other community colleges. But I would love to be able to share what we have with the commission as opposed to 7 other people trying to talk with each other all the time.
Mhm.
So has there been a discussion of something along those lines at the commission?
Mr. Chair, thanks for that question. I'm trying to think how best to answer that. The commission has a staff of 12. And we would love to have additional staff. And there may be a exception request moving forward at the budget for another position. But with those numbers of staffing, and one of those is our office assistant, one is an accountant, one, et cetera, et cetera. Most of us have many hats. So for instance, I said I was deputy director. I'm also chief academic officer, chief student services officer, workforce development facilitator, and I'm the marketing chief for the commission. And if anyone's asking, no, I have no marketing background whatsoever. So we do wear a lot of hats. Typically, to this point, the commission has been very effective, if you ask us, but I think if you ask others as well, in facilitating those discussions across the colleges and helping them to share best practices and discover what can be best done. So every or twice a month, I meet with all of the VPs of student services. Those are the people that are over student affairs, veteran services, those types of things. And we have an hour-and-a-half meeting where we we discuss all of these topics. And one of the running agenda items is veteran services and how to best support those. So that's how we've been doing it up to this point. However, if an additional position were made available, I'm sure that more work could be done. It's always hard to execute on projects that are off the side of your desk. So that's a very long answer to your question.
So Paul, based off that, so you have that crosstalk, which is good between the colleges. What's been, can you point to some results of what maybe sharing those best practices? What's been the result of those meetings? Do you have any specifics?
Yeah, I do. Some of those Casper shared, for instance, some of the recognition that it had received, and there was a lot of discussion about, what were the levels of supports that Casper had put together, why had they received that, and how could the other colleges do the same. That particular discussion, Eastern Wyoming College, which is our smallest college, they really started kind of picking the brain of Linda Toei. She's the VP of Student Services at Casper, to find out more about how they had put together that lounge and how they could solidify funding for that. Since that point, Eastern will now be opening its own lounge. They have found some ways to do that. But also, all of the colleges learned how to reach out to those publications to let them know about the accomplishments that they had had. Part of recognition is doing a good job. Another part of recognition is knowing who to tell about the good job that you're doing. And so that's, I think, another piece that that they were able to share. That's just one example, but hopefully that's helpful.
Absolutely. Any further questions? Okay. Okay, appreciate it. Any further, I guess we'll open up to public comment at this point, unless you have something, Director.
I do, Mr. Chairman. I've got a couple of slides. I'd like to put that first one up, and really it just reinforces what we've heard here this morning. Do we have that slide? Oh, okay. All right. If you go to the slide number 28, assisting veteran students at Wyoming schools. So I looked at the university and all 8 of the community colleges just to get a feel. And the one thing that is true throughout the schools is that they're able to handle GI Bill requirements and to take that. And that's a big step. That's important that they're all doing that and doing that very well. But what I did find was, and Ben talked about it, all of the schools are different. They're snowflakes. They have a different way of approaching how they do what they do. But then I want to go to the second slide, because this shows some data that we put together based on those discussions with the schools. I'd point out the University of Wyoming, Casper College, Gillette College, and Sheridan College all talk about having someone dedicated to their program. And in every one of those cases, I asked that dedicated person, hey, do your veterans have issues? And they were very strong in their response of, no, we're taking good care of our veterans. And I think they firmly believe that. And what I found was, just as you heard with Mr. Martinez, those schools with a dedicated asset, there's a lot of passion towards taking care of that veteran community. And partially because, well, they're dedicated to it. In the other schools, it was more of a shared responsibility. Now, but what I also found out there was I don't have any complaints from any veterans at at those schools either. But something that you and I talked about, Senator Boner or Mr. Chairman, was that, you know, you don't know what you don't know. The bottom line is these veterans are coming to go to school, and the biggest concern they have is, hey, how's this getting paid for? If they're doing it or they're doing it through GI Bill or whatever, that works well. So again, in Wyoming, great support for that. But again, what I would go back to is when you look at the student population, you know, we have 308 veterans at Casper College, 300 at Laramie College. So just within those two community colleges, we almost have as many as we have at the University of Wyoming. So to me, it just becomes just as important that we're able to help those schools as well. So I love the idea of dedicated assets. I think that's really critical, and whether that's, you know, I'll leave that up to others to decide how that would happen. But that's what I really saw in looking at the schools, was the importance of dedicated assets. And with that, I'd answer any questions.
Absolutely. So any questions for the director? Okay, appreciate your overview. I think that does help. And I think, you know, it dovetails pretty nicely with the testimony we heard about the opportunities that exist when you have somebody whose job it is to deal with this. And all of a sudden, you have twice as many veteran students or not all of a sudden over a decade, you have twice as many veteran students because of that individual's efforts. And it seems like there's, you could probably go through the list here that you provide on slide 29 and see a correlation between the dedicated positions and the number of you know, veteran students at the institution. So I appreciate that perspective. Any questions for the director? Okay, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Okay, any further public comment on this topic? Okay, anybody online? Okay, going once, going twice, public comment is closed. So committee, it looks like we have a situation that's pretty decent. We have some outstanding work. We have some adequate work going on throughout our post-secondary education system. So any thoughts in terms of bill drafts getting going? We heard, I think, a suggestion about having additional funding, additional position at the Community College Commission. Another route would be to have, looks like there's 2 ex officio members of that commission in addition to the 7 members. So we could have a you know, potentially ex officio position at the commission level. You know, maybe the Veterans Commission Director or his appointee, and that's another possibility. To short, you know, sort of share that expertise and you know, continue to, you know, the improvement. So any additional thoughts or comments or discussion? Representative Brown.
Mr. Chairman, I'd move to actually, I don't mind the second idea, and depending upon what the rest of the committee feels, I'd like to get a bill draft to support a halftime position at the Community College Commission to do exactly what we're talking about, and work in conjunction with the University of Wyoming and their veterans program. I do feel like it's nowhere near enough time right now for a full-time, I don't think, at the Community College Commission, but I also feel that they probably could find some other duties and responsibilities to fill that half-time with as well. And so I would motion to have a half-time Community College Commission employee added for this next budget, and have it run the program as well as other duties as assigned, but see what the committee's thoughts are.
Do I have a second? Do I have, well, we need a second. Okay, second by Senator Pappas, Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In regards to this halftime position, I would only support such a thing if it was specified that part of his responsibility was recruiting or looking for funds, as the good chief has done down there at UW. Rather than just simply assume we're going to pay for it all. Let's see if we can find some more of these willing donors.
Okay, was that an amendment, Representative? I think, okay, all right, so,
Offer an amendment.
okay, so amendment to, require the, that halftime position to look for private funding. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Senator Cole, is that?
Just a quick question on the halftime position.
Go ahead, yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just a question on the halftime position cost. I don't know if that's germane to this.
Okay, yeah, well, let's, any questions on the amendment, then we'll, okay, all those in, any discussion on the amendment? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay, Senator Cole, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What is the cost of this halftime position, all in? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Cole. At the University of Wyoming, obviously I'm a director's position. So just in looking what we did with Mr. Hepworth, it was our choice to bring him in as a senior level project coordinator. Project coordinator position, which would be our lowest entry level position coming into a job like this. Full-time would probably, I don't recall exactly what that is. I know for us looking at probably, I think that's running somewhere 36 to 42, somewhere in there, 36,000 to 42 would be a full-time position on that.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I think conceptually what we would do with this is ask for the position and then have LSO work with the commission to get us a rough figure of what they believe they would need, number one, for, because we're not voting on the bill right now. We're voting for the conceptual bill to even have the discussion next time around and see if this is worthwhile, right? So, but we would give the directive to the Community College Commission as well as LSO to figure out what a good number would look like. And then, of course, divide that in half because we're going to be doing this for a halftime position. So.
Okay, any further discussion? Go ahead, Doctor.
Yes, one quick question. Typically, Mr. Chair, typically speaking, well, the assumption has been, as discussed, that it would be a full-time position. Does the committee have preferences about what the other half would be? Or would you like that to be part of the bill as well? Or would that be left up to the needs ongoing of the commission itself?
Go ahead. Okay.
You know, I think what we would do is we would have you guys work with that. I think that's probably something maybe you, myself, and LSO can work on as we bring that forward to determine whether the full-time position is there or whether we want to make this a part-time position that fills in, 20 hours a week or something along those lines. I'm hesitant to do it either way right now, just based off of knowing what your workload increased to. And we've seen the value of that not only to your workload, but then adding on an additional person behind you. So I feel like we have value in doing a full-time position, but I also recognize the hesitancy that position is also partially funded by donations. I would venture to guess Representative Pendergraft's motion is there's probably opportunities out there for that. So I think we'll work on that.
Representative Berger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Chairman Brown or Mr. Representative Brown, and maybe possibilities of the halftime is, again, not just looking at veterans for transition, but transition for displaced workers, disabled workers, just how to transition into maybe a different career choice. And maybe that could be the possibility of for that position as well, just to think about.
Mr. Chairman.
You gotta, go ahead. Okay.
So this is the only thing I would say on that is we got to be very, very thoughtful about bringing another bill coming through into a budget session and getting 2/3 vote to bring it in. Coming out of the Military Affairs Committee, we want to make sure that it's military related. So that would be my response is I'm thinking trying to stay focused on that military connection and what's coming out of this committee.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion to get the bill draft going? Okay, all right. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Okay, that motion carries. Representative Ahern.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question was, how many people come to see you and say, considering what Representative Berger was saying, I'm not a veteran, but I'm having troubles with X, Y, and Z. transitioning in some other form? Or are we just all just military? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and Representative O'Hearn. So really that is our job, is representing our veteran community. So really who we do talk to are the veterans. We don't get very many people coming to us outside of the veteran community. Unless it's by accident because they thought we were veterinarian services. But usually we're only supporting the veteran community, sir. But just to kind of clarify that, we're also supporting not just UW veterans. We support veterans from the community that want connection to resources or how they can connect to other things, as well as LCCC Laramie campus and then also WyoTech. We're supporting those students as well.
Thank you. Any further discussion or motions on this topic? Okay, all right. Looks like we're almost back on schedule. We'll be completely back on schedule and we have a slightly shorter lunch. So back at 1:30, like I said, we're going to be leaving at 12 or 2:30 on the dot. So make sure you have any change of clothes you might need to go tour Camp Guernsey and get a nice little ride there in the UH-60. So with that, if we have any more questions.